This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate first part of what if evil Naruto was trained by Manslayer and corrupted Sasuke. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Once the class had calmed down, Academy instructor Iruka started telling the students which teams they would be assigned to. Naruto, on the other hand, simply gazed out the window at the passing clouds. After a few long minutes, Naruto heard his name called and began to focus on the teacher once more. Team 7 will consist of Uzumaki Naruto, Uchiha Sasuke, and Haruno Sakura. Naruto returned to gazing out the window and reflecting on the past after Iruka had concluded announcing the members of Team 7. The members of his team didn't really matter to him, he simply kept coming up with ways to get out of this village. If Sakura hadn't been outside waiting to be assigned to a team with a Chunin teacher keeping watch over her, she would have been cheering uncontrollably. Sasuke just decided to sigh, fantastic, my team has the biggest fangirl in the village. Later on, she will undoubtedly obstruct my path normally, having the dead last on my team would make it even worse. In addition, I would only be hampered by simply being a member of a team. However, given that Naruto was trained by the renowned Batuse, things might not be as dire as they seem. Yes, a worthy opponent to put my skills to the test. However, he has no clan and a dead last is just a dead last, thus he remains beneath Uchiha. Sasuke smirked slightly in confidence after announcing the teams. Iruka returned to his desk and instructed the class, saying, "Please wait here for your Junin sensei, they should be here very soon." Iruka then hurriedly left to go outside and tell Sakura where her team had been assigned that and letting her return to the academy, anyway. In the interim, Naruto, the blonde samurai, had decided to light a cigarette and take a drag before releasing the smoke into the air. While Sasuke was looking at him intently, Naruto continued to look at his desk as though he was lost in thought after lighting up his cigarette. While the other students in the class were excited about graduating, Sasuke simply shrugged and returned to his usual brooding. After a short while, Haruno Sakura, who was thrilled to have her beloved Sasuke-kun on her side, cheered and cheered as Iruka returned to the classroom. However, she didn't give a damn about the new player on her team because, to her, he was just a doby who had better not interfere with her love. Sakura simply shrugged her shoulders disrespectfully after Iruka swiftly chastised her for her previous actions, then skipped over to Sasuke and sat next to him. Before long, she began to swoon over the attractive boy. Iruka was on the verge of feeling sorry for him, but then he was reassured that he wasn't dealing with such irritations. Iruka made the decision to sit down and wait with the students until each Junin teacher showed up to collect their team. Naruto, on the other hand, was just going to smoke a cigarette while seated. However, after some time, some of the students in the classroom began to cough and retreated from him. The sound of coughing startled Iruka out of his reverie, and he had a displeased expression on his face when he realized what was causing it. Naruto flicked his cigarette out of the window after taking one last drag. Upon returning his focus to the classroom, he noticed several children, particularly Iruka, staring at him with irritated expressions. With a simple shrug, Naruto took out a lighter and got ready to light another one. Ahem. Naruto looked over at Iruka. Iruka said in an agitated tone, "Excuse me, I mean Naruto, but aside from the fact that you're way too young to be smoking, could you please not smoke inside the classroom? Not everyone wants to smell your smoke or catch your little habit." After shrugging once more, Naruto put his cigarette and lighter away and fell asleep, still sitting upright in his chair. A short while later, Junin instructors started showing up to collect their designated teams. After 2 hours, the room was empty except for Iruka and Team 7. Sakura continued to swoon over a grumpy and pensive Sasuke, while Naruto remained asleep. After another 30 minutes, Iruka said he had to leave for a teacher meeting and wished Team 7 luck before leaving the room. When Naruto awoke at that moment, he looked around and saw that the teacher for his team had still not arrived. He was aware that he and his teammates had been in that classroom for a considerable amount of time without the need for a clock. They waited for their Junin instructor longer than they ought to have. Sakura became irate at having to wait so long for their tardy sensei, so she stopped flirting with the final Uchiha when Naruto simply sighed. Sakura said, "What's up with you?" in the arrogant tone that all Harunos have when they despise someone, which they frequently do. After a few moments of staring at her, Naruto slammed his hand on his desk, startling Sasuke out of his reverie. The young blonde got up from behind his desk. "Fuck this shit." When Naruto used language, Sakura and Sasuke blushed. "I'm not going to waste my time like this. If our sensei even shows up, tell him that I got tired of waiting and went to spend my time on something more productive. I've already wasted 2 hours and a half of my life with this bullshit. Fuck it. And if I had my way, fuck Konoha." And with that, Naruto began to hurry out of the space. But before he could get to the door, Sasuke leapt from his desk and rushed toward Naruto. Naruto wondered what the Uchiha wanted as he cast a bewildered glance at Sasuke. "I'm coming too, Dobi. I'm not going to stay here with that crazy fangirl while you get to skip out." Sasuke trailed behind Naruto as he simply shrugged, as he has been doing a lot lately. For a minute, Sakura sat at her desk, stunned, but she quickly regained her composure and began pursuing her beloved Sasuke-kun. After leaving the Ninja Academy, Naruto glided through the remainder of Konoha with grace. By that point, Sasuke was walking silently beside him, attempting to learn anything about his enigmatic power partner. Sakura, meanwhile, continued to follow them. "Wait for me," she cried out. Naturally, hearing her screams only made Naruto and Sasuke walk more quickly. Naruto abruptly stopped and turned to face Sasuke after the disorganized trio had traveled a considerable distance. However, Sakura continued to be disregarded. "Why are you choosing to follow me, Sasuke? I have a feeling it's not because you wish to know me on a personal level or such other trivial matters," Naruto replied. The sad expression in Naruto's eyes made Sasuke shudder, and he then grinned cockily. "You're right, Dobi. I didn't seem like you were smarter than a dead last in class is supposed to be," he replied. "Still, you're a Dobi, so it doesn't even matter. But what I wanted to talk to you about was the training a nobody like you got from the legendary Batusei. Teach me everything you know from your training with him. After all, a Uchiha is superior to someone like you. If it's anyone that deserves that training, it's me." In the background, Sakura began to swoon and support her crush. Before turning to face the clouds and lighting a cigarette, Naruto simply gave Sasuke a dead stare that was so similar to his dreaded brothers that it terrified the living daylights out of the weak Uchiha. The insults the Uchiha uttered didn't matter to Naruto because he felt far worse than the simple words that a human voice box could produce. After noticing that Naruto was smoking, Sakura made the decision to inquire, "Hey dead last, aren't you a little too young to be doing that? And besides, it's bad for your health." "Not that I care or any," she said before Sasuke cut her off. "Sakura, shut up." Sakura blushed profusely and turned to face Sasuke, saying, "Sure, Sasuke-kun." After that, Sasuke returned to talking to Naruto. "Well, what's it going to be?" After a few minutes of staring at them, Naruto earned a tick mark on Sasuke's eyebrow before he chose to respond. "What would I get out of it, Sasuke? Surely there is some sort of trade that could be made?" Sasuke's expression was bewildered as he gazed at Naruto. Sasuke shook his head, confused by what the blonde was discussing. "What is that supposed to mean, Dobi? I don't get what you're saying." Naruto, for his part, simply sighed a little before offering a recommendation. "Would you be willing to lend your support to me for certain events? Or perhaps handing over various Uchiha secrets, perhaps a favor?" Before he chose to respond, Sasuke's expression darkened. "No, the only favor you will get is the honor to train Uchiha," he replied. "I'm already lowering myself to great shame by asking for assistance from a nobody. I absolutely refuse to lower myself further than that, so I demand you teach me, or I'll beat it out of you." Sakura had screamed, "Yeah, do what Sasuke-kun says, loser." To the annoyance of the young Uchiha, Naruto simply kept staring at Sasuke without ever changing his expression. "Walk with me, Sasuke, and you may receive some of my knowledge, or you may not. It just depends on how our conversation goes," Naruto said abruptly, whispering to Sasuke loud enough for Sakura to hear. "But if you choose not to follow, then it's your choice." Naruto then began to walk away. Sakura shuddered once Naruto was a block away, saying, "What a freak. Maybe he wouldn't be so sad all the time if he didn't act like that. Huh, Sasuke-kun?" she replied. Before signing in resignation and trailing his blonde teammate, Sasuke simply ignored her and continued to stare off into the direction Naruto was heading. Sakura caught up to the Uchiha in no time. Naruto heard Sasuke yell after only 5 minutes of walking away. "Hey Dobi! Wait up!" As Sakura attempted to approach Sasuke as closely as possible, the Uchiha himself rushed up and began to walk alongside him. Sakura began to complain when Sasuke got to him. "Just where are we going? Aren't we going to miss our sensei?" Naruto sighed before responding, and Sasuke snorted at that. "We're going to a place away from privy eyes. We're almost there." Sakura simply let out a melancholy sigh, while Sasuke grinned. "Whatever, Dobi, but I just want that sort of training you got," he replied. Sasuke raised an eyebrow at Naruto before concluding that the young samurai was simply strange. Naruto simply whispered, more to himself, "We will see." Later on, Naruto stopped and gazed at the Konoha village for a few seconds before lighting another cigarette and standing there with his back to Sakura and Sasuke as Team 7 arrived at the Hokage monument. "You don't remind me very much of your big brother Sasuke," said Naruto. Sakura was genuinely perplexed by what was happening, while the weakest Uchiha's eyes widened at this point. I met him a few days ago when I entered Fire Country. I didn't have enough money to buy some ramen at that time, so he paid for it as an act of generosity. He was a pleasant man to talk to. Sasuke became enraged and growled at Naruto at this point. Pleasant? You're saying Itachi is pleasant? I don't believe a butcher like him would be generous. That so-called pleasant man you met wasn't so damn generous when he slaughtered everyone in my clan but me. By now, Sasuke was clenching his fists so tightly that they were beginning to bleed, and his eyes were watering. Yes, he did inform me about being an S-class criminal, but he never told me what he did to earn such a status though. I was able to tell that he was dangerous, that much was for sure, but I believed that as long as I didn't cross him, then there would be no trouble at that current time. Naruto calmly stated. He muttered, yes, everything Itachi told me about you makes sense now, as he started to think back on his encounter with the elder Uchiha brother. At this point, furious, Sasuke began to approach Naruto in order to seize him by the throat and demand information about his despised brother, but before he could take another step, Naruto turned around and said something that stopped Sasuke dead in his tracks and possibly altered his life forever. Naruto was still wearing that dejected expression. Sasuke, I will be honest with you, I've looked up information about your brother's records in this village, but I had forgotten to look up information concerning the crime he committed. From the information gathered, he was a true prodigy. He was basically power incarnated. I have great respect for your brother Sasuke. For someone to have such power and be able to slaughter one of the most powerful clans in the Leaf is far from a small feat. If you remember correctly, he was rising in the ranks when he was still your age. Now, at first it would be easy to conclude that there are too many false claims of prodigies, and people like you could be placed in that category when compared to Itachi. However, there are unique factors regarding your potential. First of all, before I say anything else, I want you to understand that while Itachi has a lot in talent in all sorts of areas in the ninja arts, he's probably the worst when it comes to teaching or making sure to speak clearly enough without being so cryptic. And I believe that's why you're not fully reaching your potential like he asked you to. Not only that, but according to him, your family placed a lot more training on him than they did on you. He also told me that he received more opportunities and support from the clan in his ninja career, and that's why he was able to rise in the ranks so quickly. I'm very sure that those are some of the reasons why you're so behind your brother. It doesn't mean you're weak though, Sasuke. After all, you've already gained the title, Rookie of the Year, by being the strongest genin in the class. Congratulations on that achievement considering the setbacks you faced, Naruto said. Naruto really began to lie at this point. However, there is one main problem that is holding your potential back the most, and it's something that I can help you with so I can effectively start training you in my master's style. Sakura was just observing the tension between the two in bewilderment, while Sasuke was still furious and actually preparing to charge Naruto at that very moment. The words, training you, however, had Sasuke completely captivated. In actuality, Sasuke was completely unaware that he was positioning himself to be used as a pawn by Naruto in the future. He instantly became calm, but he continued to glare at Naruto with hatred and fury before clenching his teeth. He hissed, and what's that? Once again, Naruto responded calmly. Your hatred, Sasuke, your hatred, not something that I've even mastered yet, but that's mostly because I still have some sort of fear built into me concerning the mastering of such a dangerous emotion, he continued, not to mention a past that always leaves me too weak with sadness to fully master hatred. Naruto looked down towards the ground after saying that, thinking of his sensei and how his Nessen, Tomo, had betrayed and saved Kenshin all at once in the end. After giving Naruto a wide-eyed look, Sasuke stammered, he told you about that? A flat ab about what he said to me about hatred. Yes, Naruto said, nodding. He claimed to have previously told you about it. But, as I've already said, I don't think Itachi would have been a good teacher because he didn't go into great detail when describing hatred to you. Keep in mind that he never mentioned what his crime was. He just talked about whatever advice he gave you in the past. You see, Sasuke, you nearly possess enough hatred, but taking a life is insufficient to fulfill that aspect of you. No, the hard part, which is what Itachi apparently forgot to mention to you about, was controlling your hatred. Figuring out how to apply and channel it appropriately. Since almost anyone can become enraged enough to fight with greater strength, many people think that hatred is an emotion that is easy to use in combat. But doing so is like a mindless animal that can only attack people when it is angry. When people attempt to use hatred in that way, there is no art, beauty, or grace. It simply doesn't function with his hatred. Itachi employs all three elements in a way that is almost artistic. I'm sorry, Sasuke, but you've been using hatred by simply charging in without enough logic or coherent thought. It's not the right way. In fact, it's just one of the primary reasons Itachi is so much stronger than you. However, I do think that if you learn to use your hatred effectively, your chances of becoming on his level will be much higher than they are now. I still need to fully master mine, but I have a feeling that it will happen soon. After a brief period of inattention, Naruto shook his head and returned to reality. I can begin by teaching you the fundamentals of hatred, but don't expect special treatment because of your clan. Naruto lied. It's more of a favor to your older brother and out of my respect for him. Before realizing what else Naruto had said, Sasuke simply nodded with a serious expression on his face and started to shake in rage and narrow his eyes, asking, "Why is my brother involved in your decision to train me, Dobi?" Sasuke insisted. After shaking his head and extinguishing his cigarette, Naruto turned to face the village and began to explain, saying, "Because well, I think before I explain, Sakura needs to leave, she doesn't need to hear the rest of this." Sakura became enraged and started screaming at Naruto. "Baka! Do you realize that anything involving my Sasuke-kun also affects me, you freak? Well, I could use that girl with her strong devotion to the Uchiha here. Of course, I'm not sure how much use she could provide. She'd probably be more useful for some kind of cannon fodder or sacrifice for any goal I have. Very well, it's best to use any pawn that becomes available, I suppose," Naruto thought as he simply stared at her. Sakura was still screaming at him by now. "Hey, loser, don't you just ignore me? You're too beneath me to dismiss me like that, and my mom is on the council." Naruto kept ignoring her nearly useless existence and returned his focus to the Uchiha. "Sasuke, tell your wench, follower, or whatever she is to you, to be silent and return back to the academy," Naruto instructed. Sasuke grimaced at being told what to do, but he wasn't prepared to forfeit the opportunity to learn anything about the Batusei in order to murder his brother. He wouldn't give up something that significant for a small amount of pride and a bothersome pink-haired banshee. Sakura swiftly shot back, "Of course. Stop ignoring me. Just come to me and tell me that you whiskered jerk. I'm right here. And another thing, don't you dare boss sass," she yelled, but Sasuke swiftly interrupted her. "Sakura." Sasuke glared at the feeble girl and hissed at her. Sakura flinched under his scowl. "Yes, Sasuke-kun? Shut your mouth and wait for us at the academy," the Uchiha commanded her without delay. "We'll be there soon," he said. "Simply let our useless instructor know where we are if he shows up." Naruto agreed to simply wait for the instructor to meet him and Sasuke where they are now, as he didn't think the rest of the conversation between him and this Uchiha boy would go on for very long. Normally, Naruto would have interrupted Sasuke to have him tell her to tell their sensei that he and Sasuke would just meet the rest of Team 7 at the academy itself. Sakura nevertheless made the decision to speak. "But Sasuke-kun, what about a?" she began, but Sasuke interrupted her with a fierce glare. "Go now." Sasuke snarled. "Okay, Sasuke-kun," Sakura said with a hasty nod before rushing back to the academy. Sasuke turned back to Naruto, who was uninterested in what was happening. "So, what motivates you to do this? How is it related to my brother, bastard? And share with me what you know about that killer. Teach me to be as hateful as he is." Sasuke gave the order. Sasuke blinked and thought he was seeing things as Naruto's eyes changed from their original crystal and piercing blue color to a deadly amber. In actuality, Sasuke didn't merely dream it. "They say the power of the light is a harder emotion to master than hate is," Naruto said after that fleeting amber flickered. "Oh, how mistaken they are, since it is much more difficult to control true darkness of the heart. I have a desire to avoid the same temptation that my sensei did. However, a different aspect of me, one that keeps developing, longs to show itself in it. It resembles two distinct personalities. Other than that, my soul is always filled with sadness and emptiness. I am unable to fully master it because of this." After saying to himself, "Of course, a part of me is afraid to master it," Naruto shook his head and turned to face Sasuke, unable to stop the flood of memories of the battlefield when his sensei totally lost himself to his inner Batusei, to his bloodline. The boy with the raven hair was perplexed by Naruto's actions. When Naruto said, "Neither me nor your brother are completely sure that you are a true prodigy, nor if you have the potential to assist him in testing his capacity," Sasuke clenched his fist against Naruto and was about to charge him again, but before he could say anything else, the blonde samurai held out his palm to him, signaling for him to wait. Naruto remarked, "But we both know that you might have such potential. In addition to helping your brother, I'm interested to see how far your potential will allow you to match up against such a powerful warrior." But Naruto's expression darkened. "Aside from my admiration for him, Sasuke, I still want something from you. In fact, what I want can strengthen and help you. Little things make up the majority. For example, stealing scrolls and other objects, sharing with me any information you learn when you speak to the council and other meetings, and letting me know about some of the jutsus you recently acquired. I have a strong suspicion that you will receive far more instruction from our Junin sensei than any other member of Team 7 Sasuke. All you have to do is follow my example by employing the techniques of a renowned samurai like my sensei. You will have a far better chance of defeating your brother. Naturally, as he said that, Naruto smiled to himself, ensuring that Sasuke would only learn the fundamentals of how any Japanese samurai wield their swords and that he would never teach him anything more complex or specifically related to the hidden Mitsurugi Ryu style that he and his master employed. At the same time, Naruto wasn't exactly lying to Sasuke either, because in order to learn anything about the hidden Mitsurugi Ryu style, one must understand the fundamentals of using a katana the way Japanese samurai do. The fundamentals of swinging a katana the Japanese samurai way were well known, and anyone could learn about them with enough effort. Japanese samurai didn't care to keep such fundamentals a secret, but what was secret and prohibited for Japanese samurai to share was the use of katanas to execute attacks akin to those that ninjas can perform with jutsus. Naruto was most definitely not going to share that with Sasuke. Sasuke simply gritted his teeth while scowling at Naruto. Batusei's apprentice, I want to see how strong you truly are. Dobi, fight me, Sasuke shouted. It seems that the idea of following someone else did not sit well with the young Uchiha. Why can't you be more like your quiet and patient brother? Naruto asked, sighing and shaking his head. Sasuke became so furious at that point that he forgot his plan to harm the blonde in front of him. Sasuke decided to kill his future teammate now, so he took out a kunai and attempted to stab Naruto in the neck. Sasuke charged at Naruto, who just stood there. Everything happened so quickly that the Uchiha was unaware of what had struck him when Sasuke arrived at the blonde. Before a flash of steel went by and his kunai was suddenly gone, Sasuke could only remember jabbing it at the samurai who were standing calmly. At that moment, Sasuke was lying on the ground with a severe headache, staring up at the sky. Naturally, Naruto had only used his katana to knock the approaching kunai out of Sasuke's grasp before striking the Uchiha in the forehead with the butt end of his sword. Naruto swiftly sheathed his katana after Sasuke had fallen to the ground. As he lay on the ground, still in shock that he had lost so easily, Sasuke thought, "What speed, I didn't even see him move." He was also in awe of how young he was. Sasuke's view of the sky was obscured when Naruto entered his field of vision. You attacked without any strategy, concentrating on your hatred without any direction or control. Naruto said Kakashi will arrive any moment now, he said. Consider my offer, because if you accept it, you'll be one step closer to achieving the speed you just witnessed me exhibit. For the time being, all I ask is that you keep our conversation quiet, he inquired. I'll have an answer for you soon, I just need to think about it for a while, said Sasuke, nodding his head quickly before getting up and cleaning himself up before glaring at the Manslayer who had so easily defeated him. Nodding his head, Naruto said, Kakashi and Sakura are coming. How do you know that? Sasuke asked Naruto, his expression bewildered. I can't find them anywhere. At that moment, a poof was heard, and Kakashi showed up. Hey! Sasuke simply glared at the copycat ninja, while Naruto turned to face Kakashi with his typical dejected expression. For a brief moment, Kakashi narrowed his eyes at Naruto before returning to his famous eye smile and saying, Sakura will be here in a moment, so we'll wait here for a little while. While Naruto returned his attention to the view of Konoha from the top of the monument he stood on, Sasuke simply raised an eyebrow, questioning whether this man was the sensei of his team. There was a hidden part of Naruto that wanted to see it burn. 2 minutes later, Sakura finally made it to the scene, panting from all the running she had done, stopping and bending with her hands on her knees before standing straight again and pointing angrily at the Junin. You? As he responded, Kakashi arched an eyebrow and said, yes? Why in hell did you vanish and abandon me in that state? What the hell is wrong with you? I could have been carried by you or something. To run all the way back over here. Baka-sensei, you didn't have to just leave me there. Sakura was annoyed when Kakashi rubbed his ears, and Sasuke thought he could feel blood seeping through his own ears due to Sakura's loud screams. Naruto simply shook his head at the screen. Well, Sakura, did you say something? Suddenly reading his porn, Kakashi asked. Before the Junin coughed and put his book away, Sakura simply snarled at Kakashi. Why weren't you all present in the room as you should have been? Kakashi glared at the three genin and said, your academy teacher should have told you to stay put in the classroom until your Junin instructor arrived. As Sasuke's eyes grew wide and Naruto merely gazed at the Cyclops, Sakura recoiled and took a step back. You're our sensei, then? Sasuke inquired. Yes, my name is Sasuke. Sakura's voice was loud enough for you to hear, so I'm sure you should have known already, but then again, perhaps you're already deaf enough to have misheard her a while back if you spent enough time with her? With his characteristic eye smile, Kakashi asked. Baka-sensei, what the devil did you say? Sakura glared daggers at her Junin instructor while hissing through her teeth. Sasuke frowned and thought, I wouldn't be surprised if I already am going deaf because of that pink-haired demon. He's probably right. Now, let's return to the query I posed earlier. Why was Sakura the only person in the room when I arrived? Kakashi narrowed his eyes at the three genin once more and asked. Sakura started to reply, but Sasuke interrupted her. Kakashi-sensei, why didn't you arrive in time to meet us? Naturally, Kakashi provided a valid reason for his tardiness. I got lost on the road of life. Well, we Kakashi-sensei did too, so it appears that you're not alone anymore, are you? Sasuke smirked haughtily as he asked. Gazing at Sasuke, Kakashi thought, smart ass. Well, it appears that we all got lost. Look, just wait for me next time, okay? Kakashi's side genins, in contrast to me, are unable to plan their time for meetings such as this one. Therefore, don't just leave whenever I'm running late. Besides, at least I bothered to even show up when only one of you were there. Even so, Sakura was only present to let me know where you two were because she had previously accompanied you both. The lazy Jonin looked at Naruto and said, I don't want to have to chase any of you down just because someone got a little impatient and decided to leave. Guys, please don't do it again. I was now planning to meet us on the academy building's roof. We're all the way over here, though, so I guess this location is equally good, so let's all take a seat and give our introductions, he said. Sasuke took a seat on his left side, while Naruto took a seat in a meditative position. Sakura moved as close to Sasuke, her crush, as she could. After everyone had taken their places, Kakashi said, okay, let's get the introductions out of the way. Saying, Pinky, you're up first, Kakashi gestured to Sakura. Pinky? I'll kick his ass for that. Cha, Sakura's inner voice punched the air. Sakura was equally enraged by the remark as inner Sakura was, what, not Pinky, but Haruno Sakura is my name. Sakura screeched, then she started to think before timidly asking a question. Kakashi-sensei, could you go first, so the rest of us could know how to introduce ourselves? Kakashi simply shrugged. All right. My name is Kakashi. You have no business knowing what I like or dislike. I have a few interests. As for a dream, I don't really have one. All right. Pinky, go now. Sakura became enraged. As I previously stated, my name is not Pinky, she shouted. She calmed down and chose to go on. My likes are, she said, glancing at Sasuke before blushing and laughing. My hobbies are, she repeated to Sasuke, and my dream is, and then she squeals after giving the Uchiha one last glance. What about the things you don't like? Kakashi let out a sigh. I don't like Naruto Baka and Ino Pig. Well, fuck you too, said Naruto coolly. You bastard, what did you say to me? All right, let's avoid fighting. Watch what you say, Naruto, Kakashi said. Now that you've spoken up, how about you give a brief introduction? He gestured to Naruto with a finger. Sakura gave the blonde a smug smile before he scolded her, and she began to splutter in anger. Kakashi was about to chastise him once more when Naruto interrupted him. My name is Naruto. Nobody is interested in my preferences. My interests and aspirations are no different. He is a samurai and a demon, Kakashi thought sharply, but at least he acts like a ninja by being smart enough to not give away any information about himself. All right, then, go for the brooder now, Kakashi said, gesturing to Sasuke. My name is Uchiha Sasuke, Sasuke said, glaring at Kakashi for being called that before closing his eyes. There are a lot of things that I detest and very few things that I enjoy. I don't have any interests in killing a certain man as my dream. No, it's more of an ambition. After a brief period of silence, Kakashi coughed and said, well, what an interesting group. You will all meet me at Training Ground 7 tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. The actual Genin exam will be taken by all three of you. It has a 66% failure rate, and you'll throw up if you eat anything. And one more crucial reminder: when I arrive, you all need to be there. Goodbye. Kakashi vanished in a puff of smoke after that. What? But I thought the test we took at the academy was the real Genin exam, Sakura yelled. It seems that the academy test was only used to determine who might become Genin. It appears that Kakashi's test will be used to separate those who are prepared to become ninjas from those who are not. Naruto said, I'll see all of you tomorrow, and started to leave, but he halted abruptly and turned to face the Uchiha. Sasuke. Sasuke nodded, conveying the hidden message that nothing more needed to be said. Remember the agreement? They didn't have to say anything to confirm it. The message was clear from the moment they met eyes. Naruto gave Sasuke a nod in return before turning to leave once more. After seeing the peculiar exchange between her two teammates, Sakura thought, I wonder what that was about. Oh well, it's probably nothing important, but I'm not going to let Naruto get away with correcting me about the test or talking back to me, that's for sure. Sakura hurried over to Naruto, who was still visible as he was leaving, while inner Sakura was encouraging her the entire time. She usually followed him home whenever she could, but Sasuke was just standing there wondering what she was doing, and she stomped over to Naruto, looking angry. Oh no, if Naruto is as skilled as he displayed earlier, then he may end up killing her, not that I care, but I would have to go back to the academy if there isn't a third member on the team, and that's not going to happen, Sasuke thought as he suddenly froze. At that moment, Sasuke moved to Sakura and Naruto's location to be nearer to them in case something happened between them that needed his quick intervention. Sasuke would soon be shown to be correct. Naruto was lost in his thoughts about his sensei's passing as he made his way back to his apartment. He was often lost in such morbid thoughts these days, and it was at this moment that he remembered all the wonderful times he had with Kenshin and Tomo. He allowed a small, sad smile to appear on his face as he was abruptly transported back to those pleasant memories, only to be brutally brought back to cold, concrete reality by a fist slamming hard into his head. After punching Naruto in the back of the head, Sakura smirked smugly and arrogantly before snapping in anger and yelling at him, "Never correct me again or talk back to me, Baka. You have no right to. You're probably just an orphan who was taken off the streets. After all, your opinion is dead last, and no one really cares. You are nothing more than a nobody who is beneath me. What then grants you the authority to?" Sakura was about to finish her sentence when Naruto abruptly turned around and faced her. He no longer had the same dejected smile on his face. Instead, he was glaring at her with icy eyes. Sakura was frozen in place by those eyes, which were a shade of glowing amber, but all that was visible in them was rage and insanity, and not the kind of insanity where someone is bouncing around in an orange jumpsuit while yelling about becoming Hokage when the entire village would despise him for having a demon inside of him. In terms of someone being humorous and pulling practical jokes, it wasn't the kind of insanity that few would dare attempt to pass off. Sakura only realized that it was the Itachi kills his own clan kind of insanity, and a moment later she felt the air drag painfully out of her as Naruto's knee was thrust into her stomach. She was immediately thrown against a rock wall that was a part of the mountain they were on by the force of the impact, and then Naruto suddenly materialized in front of her and began to squeeze her sensitive throat more forcefully every second. Sakura actually tried to scream, but all that came out of her throat was the sound of someone choking. Naruto kept squeezing Sakura's throat while he gleefully observed her expression of shock, horror, and pain. His eyes were glazed with pleasure and insanity at Sakura's suffering, and he couldn't help but smile at her in a sick and twisted way. "You fucking bitch, never touch me with your filthy hands again. Don't ever touch me, no matter who you are. However, since you will die today anyhow, I guess you won't need to be concerned about this warning, will you? At least I didn't have to know you for very long, Haruno, so goodbye." Just as Naruto was about to break Sakura's neck, Sasuke rushed up behind him, threatening to put his kunai to Naruto's throat and demand that he release Sakura. But the blonde samurai's katana blade appeared against Sasuke's own throat as if he had never moved it. Naruto calmly said, "Don't interfere, Sasuke," as though killing his own teammate were just as important as discussing the weather. Before he spoke, Sasuke was taking shaky breaths. "Do Dobi. It's imperative that you relax. Like you, I despise Sakura. However, if you kill her now, you will either be sentenced to life in prison or put to death for murder, in addition to having to return to the academy. Personally, I have no desire to return to the academy after all the training you underwent. I'm sure you don't want to either, but even if none of that matters to you, you'd better keep in mind that you'll have a lot more issues than I will. After all, you will suffer worse repercussions, and I will simply return to the academy." Sakura would have been devastated by Sasuke's disregard for her, but right now, everyone's favorite psychotic blonde was causing her too much suffering and anxiety. Naruto stopped what he was going to do to Sakura, then looked at Sasuke with an emotionless expression on his face. "Sasuke, you're correct. I can't put up with that much trouble from an obnoxious wench. You've appeared to show off your brother's intelligence. I'm impressed. Maybe you have the potential your brother and I had hoped for." Naruto was comparing him to his brother once more, and Sasuke wasn't sure if he should be pleased or upset about it. However, he didn't have much time to think about it because he had to get ready to try to step in once more as Naruto returned his focus to Sakura. Sakura whimpered in agony and terror as Naruto applied a firm squeeze to her neck, saying, "As for you, you're going to live today thanks to the Uchiha. However, Haruno, My warning is still valid because you will be alive. Don't mess with me. I take it that you won't ever talk about what I did to you today? With caution in his voice, Naruto posed the question. Sakura stammered, why yes, I promise, just please, and then began to cry like the pitiful person she is. Please let me go. I swear that I won't tell anyone. I don't want to die, so I won't ever hit you again. The young Haruno girl started crying more intensely and trembling in terror. Naruto simply let go of her throat, but she barely had time to take a breath before he snatched her by the collar of her shirt and gave her a backslap before hurling her once more into a rock wall. Sakura collapsed on the floor, coughing and inhaling deeply as she was slammed into the wall. The 2 blows to her face from the hard slap had hurt her entire body, and if that wasn't enough, the lack of oxygen she was denied was burning her throat. Sasuke just stared at his teammate in horror, amazed at how aloof Naruto could be at one moment, and then somber at another, almost as if he was totally submissive. Then the next day, Naruto might turn violent and heartless. Is that what hate does to people? Would he turn that way if he accepted Naruto's help? However, he had long vowed that he would not allow anything to stop him from killing his despised brother, but for the first time in his life, Sasuke was questioning whether it would be worthwhile to focus on getting revenge on him. It appeared that the cost of taking his brother's life would be as cruel as Naruto was at the time, as if his eyes were becoming more accustomed to reality. Wench, I'll keep you to your word. Get up now, you pitiful pile of flesh, Sakura was hissed at by Naruto. More tears streamed down Sakura's face as she lay there and cried, please Naruto, I'm so sorry, please ya. Before she began to cry once more while taking shaky breaths. Naruto snarled in anger after mockingly saying, I'm sorry, please ya. Goddammit, stop your pathetic crying and get up. Sakura could only scream in agony as Naruto approached her bleeding form and kicked her in the ribs, causing some of her ribcage's bones to crack. I told you to get up, you little bitch. You should have enough energy to get back on your feet because you had enough to punch me a while back. She cried out in agony as Naruto kicked her once more, this time in the stomach. Swiftly approaching Naruto, Sasuke took him by the shoulder. Sasuke whispered, Naruto, he didn't want to watch this happen any longer. He couldn't stand by and watch it go on, for whatever reason. Sasuke was frozen in terror when Naruto turned around and glared at him, but he was still able to decipher the message in Naruto's eyes. Avoid interfering or you'll be the next. Sasuke's body was filled with fear because of those very eyes. He didn't just imagine them. They were real. It must be some kind of bloodline. What really frightened him, though, were the eyes of a killer, and not just any killer, but a psycho murderer. Only his brother had such a pair of eyes, and only his brother had ever instilled such fear in him. The intense glare from Naruto forced Sasuke to take a step back. Sakura began to groan in agony as she felt her hair being pulled, and Naruto turned around and grabbed her by the hair. For now on, you will lower that voice of yours, Haruno, Naruto said in a cool, deadly whisper after bringing her face a few inches away from his own. If I have to put up with your banshee-like scream every single day, I won't put up with it. I don't appreciate it. You had better not let your foolish sentiments stand in the way of this so-called team, even though I don't really care about your interest in the Uchiha. I won't say it again because I assume you already know that you should never touch me again. You will now refer to me as Naruto-sama. No more of that baka, loser, or dobi nonsense. To be honest, everyone thinks I'm the ideal candidate for that title simply because I graduated last in my class. If that were the only situation, it wouldn't be so pitiful, but even after that academy instructor told everyone about my unique training, it seemed as though I would be given the title of dead last for life. Even though everyone is aware that I was trained by one of the world's most dangerous swordsmen and the deadliest samurai in Japan, I don't really care, but it won't be long before the so-called wolf fire is swiftly eradicated if Konoha residents judge adversaries based on such insignificant factors. Finally, just to be clear, if you ever want to talk to me, you should ask for my permission or wait to talk until you've had a chance to talk to me. Sakura nodded so quickly that it looked like the poor girl's head would break off. Sakura's cheek was stroked by Naruto, who then whispered softly in her ear, Guda. You'll be obedient for me, won't you? Sakura, you won't let me down, will you? Sakura's heart began to beat more quickly as she gazed into his chiseled face and amber eyes, felt him breathe into her ear, and experienced an unexplained sensation of pressure inside of her. Sakura couldn't help but groan softly in pleasure. Even a simple touch like that from him could turn her on so much. Sakura, Naruto whispered once more, and Sakura shivered with pleasure as his breath tickled her ear. Oh my goodness, she had no idea that someone could evoke such emotions with such ease. Then Sakura whispered back, no Naruto-sama, I won't fail you, in a nervous and quiet voice. Excellent also, if you ever mention what happened here, I won't be the only one disappointed in you, Naruto said. Nodding at Sakura's submission. I'm sure Sasuke won't like it either. He directed his attention back to the Uchiha and asked. Sasuke was still frozen in place, experiencing both fear and confusion at the same time. A minute before, Naruto had been holding Sakura in agony and terror, but all of a sudden, he had subdued her in blissful pleasure. Sasuke gazed at the scene before him, wondering, is this how true power is like? Even though Naruto's question sounded innocent and had no ulterior motive, he could tell that the threat was still hanging in the air, and he didn't want to disobey the warning in that question. Despite all of his arrogance, the intelligence that his brother was so famous for became temporarily activated in his mind, and he shook his head in fear when Naruto addressed him about Sakura. It was perhaps one of the few smart choices Sasuke had ever made in his life, because he could see that if he answered incorrectly to Naruto's question, he would find himself in the same situation that Naruto had placed Sakura in. Uchiha or no Uchiha, he was no match for someone who had such a firm grasp on the power that hatred can bestow. In an unsteady voice, Sasuke said, "And no, I won't like that Naruto," before addressing Sakura to make sure his blonde teammate was happy. Sakura, I won't like it if you tell anyone about what happened today, Al-Arlite. Naturally, Naruto's satisfied grin was obviously malevolent. If Sakura hadn't been enjoying herself so much because of Naruto right now, she would have experienced heartbreak once more. Then Naruto returned his focus to Sakura, who had whimpered a little when Naruto stopped petting her face. You see? You don't want your crush to be angry with you, do you? You see that, don't you, Sakura? He would be extremely hurt, as well as me, if you betrayed him in this manner. With a sympathetic tone, Naruto asked, bringing his face close to Sakura, his breath now grazing her lips. Sakura's eyes were now half open and glazed over, and she answered in a quiet, shy voice that, ironically, used to be loud all the time. Why yes Naruto-sama. With a slow nod of satisfaction, Naruto said softly, good girl. To the surprise of his two teammates, Naruto's face softened a little and his eyes reverted to their typical blue and crystal hues, bringing back the perpetually dejected expression. Then he let go of Sakura's hair and gently set her down on the ground. Sakura started to fall toward the ground as soon as she was freed. She was simply too exhausted to stand any longer, in addition to the fact that her entire body hurt, including her ribs, and that she was currently experiencing shock, a great deal of fear, and so many different emotions that her brain was on the verge of shutting down. But before Sakura even touched the ground, Naruto gathered her in his powerful arms and turned to face Sasuke. Sakura just embraced him and cuddled up against his chest, astonished to see how muscular his chest was and flushed at the realization Naruto's samurai attire, after all, completely concealed him, making it impossible for anyone to accurately estimate his physical prowess, a significant advantage in combat, as it made it difficult for the enemy to assess his opponent's strength. Naruto scowled in disgust at Sakura's love for him. He just had a natural talent for drawing the other sex to him in a way that made it seem like they were in a trance. This had its benefits, like when he demonstrated it a while back when Sakura submitted to him, but it also had drawbacks, like when he had to push it a little to make it work, which he hardly ever did save for the pink-haired girl in his arms. After all, she had been totally preoccupied with the Uchiha Boya, but it was also a drawback because there was a chance that someone would try to touch him. The fact that he only permitted Kenshin-sensei, Tomo-nessen, and one other person to touch Hima. Sadly, the first two were no longer among the living, and the last one could be anywhere, was one of the main reasons Naruto lost control of his temper a while ago. Another was that he didn't like being brought back to the harsh reality he was in such a harsh way, especially when he was enjoying pleasant memories that evoked positive emotions that he hardly felt anymore. Returning to Naruto's initial line of reasoning, even though he didn't like the pink-haired girl touching him, he had to touch her in order for her to be of some use to him. He sighed at that realization. Another drawback was that most of the women he spoke to were only interested in getting into his pants. After all, his natural abilities strongly attracted the opposite sex to him, so he usually couldn't even hold a normal or decent conversation with them without being constantly flirted with. Although he wasn't particularly concerned about having a significant other, he wished that she would at least have feelings for him because of who he is as a person and not an inanimate object for their amusement. After shaking his head to get his thoughts straight, Naruto returned his focus to Sakura. Now Sakura, if anyone asks why you address me as Naruto-sama, you'll tell them the reason is because you admire me for being apprenticed by the famous Batusei, Naruto remarked. My teacher had many fangirls after all, and so did I. Naruto paused, remembering moments when his life wasn't as chaotic as it is now. Kenshin-sensei and Tomo-nessen, I truly am alone now. It was as if yesterday that I was surrounded by people who cared for me and today I'm suddenly thrown into a foreign place where everyone hates me, Naruto thought sorrowfully, recalling the time when his brother and sister figure were still alive and took care of him. So, many people will just assume that you're one of those fangirls, Sakura, Naruto said, struggling to contain a sob or any hint of a tear before continuing. Will you comply with my request? Sakura couldn't help but notice how lovely Naruto's voice sounded, but she must have been too preoccupied with Sasuke to notice he asked in his typical quiet, gentle voice. Sakura buried her face in Naruto's chest and muttered, "Why yes, Naruto-sama." Naruto then turned to face Sasuke, who was still stunned. "Sasuke, will you support her account? I hope you'll respond in the same way," Naruto inquired. Sasuke quickly nodded his head once more. While many would have found it amusing to witness Sasuke in this state, there was nothing amusing about the current circumstances. "Naruto, of course, Dobi," Sasuke said, "I'll support your account and remain silent about what actually transpired today." Naruto had faith in the power of fear, even though he knew he was taking a risk by putting so much faith in those two. Sometimes you just have to take chances to accomplish a goal. With a sigh of satisfaction, Naruto said, "Good," and approached Sasuke. "Carry Sakura to the hospital." Naruto put Sakura in Sasuke's arms and said, "Once you're there, just say that you and Sakura were sparring real hard and she got her hurt badly." Sakura had always wished to be held in this manner by Sasuke, but she obviously realized that Naruto's embrace was softer and safer despite being in her crush's arms. Sakura couldn't help but whimper in disapproval at being taken out of Naruto's warm embrace. Before he could speak clearly, Sasuke began to stammer, "But why'd I have to do it? Why are you unable to do it? If I put Sakura in such a situation, won't I face consequences? Are you simply attempting to hold me accountable for the harm you caused to her?" Sasuke argued angrily. Sasuke was about to continue their argument when Naruto noticed a tiny, slowly expanding amber glow in his eyes. Naruto simply stared at Sasuke in silence. Sasuke shivered in fear at the thought of being on the receiving end of Naruto's amber glare like Sakura was. No, he most definitely didn't want to be in the state that Sakura was in a while ago. At that moment, he lost all anger and decided that getting punished for Sakura's condition would be far better than Naruto's response to disobedience. "I'll definitely carry her for you. Nah, Naruto, I'll also accept the blame therefore. None of it needs to worry you," Sasuke nervously said. "I'll handle everything." At the end, he attempted to give his usual haughty smirk, but all he managed was a nervous smile. Sasuke had never imagined that he would be so terrified of someone other than his brother, particularly the class Dobi. Previously, he would have laughed at the thought of him ever having to deal with this kind of circumstance, but now. To Sasuke's relief, Naruto's amber eyes instantly vanished as the Batuse's apprentice gave the terrified Uchiha a sly smile. "Yes, this is going better than I had hoped for." "Good," Naruto thought. "I didn't even have to do anything to the brat, and already he's beginning to submit to me after just witnessing what I did to Sakura." "All right, Sasuke, thank you so much for this. You won't be punished, though, because of Sakura's condition as the last devoted Uchiha and all. You seem to be highly regarded in this village, therefore, I'm confident that the worst you'll receive will be a straightforward reprimand," Naruto remarked. "Okay, Naruto, I believe you," Sasuke said with a simple nod. "I'm going to take her to the hospital now. Later, I'll see you." However, Sasuke was certain of one thing, and that Naruto's punishment would undoubtedly be worse than whatever consequence he would have to face from the village for the pain Sakura endured. He shivered at the thought of going through the same treatment that the pink-haired girl suffered at Naruto's hands. Of course, he wasn't entirely sure that his status in the village would prevent him from facing more serious consequences than a verbal reprimand, but he knew that his chances of receiving punishment from Naruto for arguing were higher than the likelihood that he would be punished by the village for what happened to the girl. With Sakura in his arms, Sasuke turned around and started to walk to the hospital. "Yes, tomorrow I will see you too. For now, Sasuke, goodbye," Naruto replied. "Goodbye, Naruto," Sasuke replied as he continued walking to the hospital. Naruto simply watched them until they were out of sight before turning back to the village of Konoha on top of the cliff he was standing on. He started to consider how Kenshin Sensei and Tomo Nessen would react if they knew how he was acting at the moment. He knew that they would be deeply hurt at seeing him manipulate and hurt people as he did with his two so-called teammates. They would hardly believe that he would be willing to use them like pawns on a chessboard. However, the fact is that they are no longer with him. Naruto was drowning in grief every day as he gradually lost pieces of his heart and mind, becoming more and more numb to all emotions save sadness and hatred at the moment. He was fighting against the growing darkness within himself, and he truly was, but it was evident from his treatment of Sakura some time ago that he was losing badly to his hatred and darkness. It was definitely as if he was composed of two personalities. In reality, Naruto was just a lost, scared, and confused 12-year-old boy, and he knew this because his sensei's final words described how he would have lived if he had survived the Japanese Civil War. Basically, Kenshin Sensei's post-war way of life would have involved strictly adhering to the path of light and not killing anymore. But Naruto wasn't sure if he could honor his sensei by taking this route, given that a bigger and developing part of him desired to acquire the total power of hatred, to be engulfed in darkness. It was so incredibly difficult for Naruto to simultaneously want to acquire and deny that power. After shaking his head at such sophisticated ideas, Naruto turned around and began to make his way home. Later on, Naruto decided to buy some groceries when he arrived in the middle of Konoha, but after spending so much time in Japan, he had completely forgotten about the difficulties he had in Konoha when he went shopping, which included being frequently thrown out, being overcharged, and generally being duped. As soon as Naruto entered a grocery store, he immediately recalled that issue when the proprietor hurried over to him and took hold of his shoulder. "You dirty demon, leave my store. This is not Japan, where you can go wherever you want with your repulsive kind. Therefore, you foolish Kyuubi brat, you had better get used to living in Konoha for the remainder of your pitiful life," the proprietor of the store yelled, then proceeded to push Naruto out of the establishment. Apparently, though, Naruto disagreed with the bastard about growing accustomed to anything, as evidenced by the fact that the foolish store owner was soon in agony and terrified as he gazed at Naruto's luminous amber eyes and felt the killer's hand jerk his wrist. Naturally, before acting, Naruto used all of his senses to see if anyone else was in the small shop. Since there were no windows, no one could really see what was going on. The store owner screamed in agony as soon as he felt his wrist snap, but he was only able to scream for a few seconds before Naruto grabbed his head and slammed it into a wall with such force that the man passed out and fell to the floor, where he would be sleeping forever because Naruto immediately pulled out his katana and stabbed him through one of his eyes into his brain. Naruto then wiped the blood off his blade on the man's shirt before sheathing it and locking the door. After that, he carried on shopping as if nothing had happened. After half an hour, Naruto had just finished getting everything he needed and was going to head out the front door when he heard a voice say, "Honey?" This person had swiftly unlocked the door and entered, and it was clear that she was the store owner's wife. She saw Naruto right away and gave him a shocked, angry glare because she was one of many people in Konoha who detested him. However, she stiffened when she saw the store owner's body. "Dan, my husband, no, 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 Dan," she sobbed over his body as she dropped to her knees. Naruto, for his part, enjoyed witnessing the woman's suffering. Of course, the store owner's wife's suffering, particularly her loss, was nothing in comparison to the pain and loss Naruto had experienced throughout his life. For a few minutes, Naruto stood behind her, taking pleasure in the agony the woman was going through. To be honest, he would have painted the lovely scene in front of him if he had paint and a canvas. It was so beautiful, so silent except for the obvious sobbing and accepted sadness in the air. What a shame. Oh well. In order to leave as soon as possible, Naruto made the decision to make his presence known and resume his business. After all, he didn't want to be discovered for the second heinous act of the day, did he? Naruto said, "Don't worry, you'll be joining him soon," as he carefully removed his katana from its sheath. The woman jerked to her feet at the sound of the manslayer's voice, spun around, and gave her husband's killer the most intense glare she could manage. "You monster, you won't get away with this. For this, I'll see to it that you are executed, as you ought to have been at birth. Can you hear me? You'll be held accountable for your actions." But before the woman could finish speaking, Naruto shoved his katana under her chin, through her mouth, and out of her head, killing her instantly. He then twisted the katana so that its sharp end faced him before thrusting his sword in his direction, cutting the wife's face in half as blood and teeth fell all around him. Her body fell harshly to the ground. Yes, very beautiful. Naruto, on the other hand, simply wiped the blood off her clothing with his blade before heading out. However, he discovered a large container of gasoline in the store, so he quickly poured it all over the building before setting it on fire with the flick of a cigarette he was smoking while he was pouring the flammable liquid. As everything began to catch fire, Naruto saw the back door and quietly left through it to increase his chances of not being connected to what he had done. After 10 minutes, when Naruto eventually arrived at his apartment, he unlocked the door before entering and carefully arranging his groceries before making his way, seemingly in a daze, to his bedroom. Naruto collapsed on the bed as soon as he entered his bedroom, and soon after he began to have memories of his sensei and Tomo. He started crying. The silence in his room always did that to him, but he was accustomed to it because he had been doing the same thing every night since he got to Konoha, and the thought of simply being in that terrible place made him feel even more sad about their deaths. After a short while, Naruto sobbed himself to sleep and started dreaming about the moment he had traveled from the place that would always be his homeland to Konoha. Japan. The dream of Naruto, flashback. Plus it was a lovely day when Naruto reached the gates of Konoha, and upon entering Hai no Kuni, he was pleasantly surprised to see his old friend Uchiha Itachi, who had fought with him during the Civil War in Japan. Because Naruto and Itachi had become such close friends, the young Uchiha started teaching Naruto some jutsus and other ninja fighting techniques, which allowed Naruto to meld everything he had learned with his own samurai fighting style. Normally, the average person wouldn't be able to learn so much from a ninja when they're in the middle of a war and have limited time to learn from Itachi, but Naruto would be what Konoha views as a genius. Since Itachi was the only known living member of the Uchiha clan aside from his younger brother who lived back at Konoha, he wore the standard Akatsuki cloak with a pattern of red clothes on it, a Sugagasa hat with strips of paper and bells hanging from the edges, and he made sure not to use his Mangekyo Sharingan or allow many people to see his eyes. As a result, it would be easy for people with current knowledge about the Uchiha clan to conclude that he had come to Japan on behalf of an organization known as Akatsuki. And that would always be the last thing anyone saw if they ever happened to catch a glimpse of Itachi's Sharingan eyes. As long as Itachi's relationship with his village didn't conflict with the cause he was fighting for, Naruto didn't give a damn. When the blonde had arrived from Japan, Uchiha Itachi was kind enough to pay for Naruto's ramen at one of the smaller villages in Hai no Kuni. Yes, what a nice guy. Of course, it wasn't as if Naruto and Itachi had planned to meet. They just happened to cross paths. Normally, Naruto would have been able to pay for ramen, but he had to leave the majority of his money at home, so he only brought enough to pay for a ride on a ship to Hai no Kuni itself because Japanese currency wasn't accepted in the elemental countries. Naruto was currently wearing a chin-high collar black cloak that resembled that of the Akatsuki members, but it was completely black and lacked any red clouds. He was also wearing a Sugagasa hat, which Itachi had given him years ago, which he only wore in situations like this when he wanted to hide his identity, like in Japan when he would wear it out in battle to keep anyone from knowing what he looked like, especially from leaf ninjas. Naruto sighed as he saw the gates of Konohagakure, which seemed to loom over him with a depressing and hopeless feeling. Even after all these years, he really didn't want to go back there because it wasn't fair. He didn't have a childhood as far back as he could remember. His early years were spent fleeing mobs and other unpleasant experiences. The rest of his life was spent under the Hikitori Batusei's teachings. More significantly, though, during the Bakumatsu no Doran, a bloody civil war that had spread throughout Japan. At the end of Bakumatsu no Doran, Naruto was able to fulfill both his and his sensei's dreams of ending Japan's terrible corruption and ushering in a protracted period of peace. However, all of that came at a very high cost for the blonde, as he lost his sensei and sister figure, Kenshin and Tomo, who were some of the most intimate people he had ever known. It was Kenshin who kept his sanity together, and Tomo who had always made sure he would still cling to his emotions after all the blood he spilled. And now they were no more lost. Naruto would never again hear Kenshin's proud smile or Tomo's gentle, kind laughter whenever he taught him something new. Naruto's eyes began to water as the familiar sorrow rose from his stomach and burst from his chest, but he forced himself to stop crying because he had already done enough crying after the funeral of his two beloved people. He had spent days in a hotel room, lying on a futon and buried under blankets, sobbing until it felt like there was not a single tear left in his body. His sobbing was so loud and intense that anyone in the hallway where his hotel room was located, after being alone in a small room, Naruto spent a few more days just lying against a tree and gazing out at the ocean, thinking about the past and what might have been. That was the blonde samurai's greatest concern. After the civil war ended, Naruto, Kenshin, and Tomo had planned to simply start over, relocate to a remote and tranquil area of Japan, lead a modest life, and possibly even start farming. This was supposed to be the conclusion of their story. They all wanted to live together as a family without having to worry about dying today or tomorrow. To live in tranquility and be able to enjoy each other's company every day. At that thought, Naruto grinned bitterly. Kenshin Sensei and Tomo Nessen are already dead, so at least they won't have to worry about dying at any point. However, given where I'm going, it seems like I'll still have that issue. Glaring at the gates of Konoha, Naruto couldn't help but feel jealous of Kenshin and Tomo, who had entered the afterlife smiling after passing away, holding each other as soulmates, as complete individuals, and enjoying the privilege of dying, knowing that they had finally found their place in the world. Now, he was certain that he would never experience the same thing. As though a demon container wasn't worthy of it. Even though it wouldn't have been exactly how they had envisioned their situation after the civil war ended, Naruto could have died with them and then been with his two favorite people. The corpse of Tomo, who appeared to be sleeping peacefully, was still in Kenshin's arms, and Naruto was left alone in the snow-covered battlefield where his sensei had fought and perished. Naruto believed that he would not be granted the same benefits that Kenshin and Tomo had received upon their deaths, Instead, he would simply be left broken and hurt, and he would have to bear all of that grief alone. This was likely what had affected him nearly as much as the loss of the two people he loved the most. That he was alone and that he would stay alone. This belief was only strengthened months after the war, when he was compelled to return to Konoha, the only place in the world where he would feel most alone and like he was nothing, or else he would be hunted down by Hunter Nin for the rest of his life, even throughout Japan, since the country was in too bad shape to retaliate against the meddling of another country. In addition, Konoha had threatened to declare war on Japan if he wasn't brought back to Hai no Kuni, where he was born. Given the state of affairs, Japan could not have resisted such an invasion, having recently concluded a protracted civil war in which many soldiers and other resources had been lost. The nation could have defended itself against Konoha and its allies for a year at most before being wiped out. In the end, it would have come down to who had the most resources, and although Japan would have fought hard and even defeated a good number of Konoha's ninja with it, the Leaf had such an advantage because Konoha hadn't been in a war for as long as Japan. When the Japanese government asked Naruto to attend, he was shocked to see that many of Kenshin's allies were part of the country's new leadership. Although Naruto didn't know them well, he had a great deal of respect for their efforts during the war. Both in terms of how they planned battles and how they actually fought them. He knew why they had called him because word had quickly spread throughout Japan that the ninja village of Konoha was threatening war in order to obtain Japan's Batusei apprentice. Many Japanese people were outraged by Konoha's actions because Naruto had had the same impact on the war as his sensei. The blonde samurai recalled how Naruto had entered a government building and confronted Japan's top government officials, declaring he would return to Konoha for the sake of his beloved nation before they could even speak. Naruto, on the other hand, was quite taken aback and moved by the government officials' refusal to compel him to leave. They made it apparent to him that they would prepare Japan to fight Konoha because it would have been the least they could do for the effort he had made in the Civil War, as well as to honor his sensei, the Batusei himself. At that point, he had started crying, feeling deeply honored and grateful for the support Japan's people were willing to give him. He was practically a hero there. For a brief moment, Naruto considered staying in Japan, the country he loved and sacrificed so much for. At least there would have been some happiness there. Unfortunately, he knew that if he loved his country so much, he would have to be transferred to Konoha so that Japan would at least have a chance to rebuild itself without the threat of already being destroyed as a result. To the dismay of Japan's people, Naruto declined his country's assistance and agreed to Konoha's terms despite their wishes. Japan's top government officials reluctantly agreed with the Batusei's apprentice. However, before Naruto left, the Emperor of Japan himself got up, walked over to him, and bowed before him, thanking him and his master for their services and bestowing upon him the title of Batusei, a resuscitation of Himara Kenshin's strength and resolve. There was a great deal of excitement in the air when the Emperor's words were announced because a sizable crowd had gathered inside and outside the building to hear what would happen to their blonde-haired hero. The Emperor embraced Naruto, who was now on his knees and sobbing in public. Weeping for all his fallen allies, weeping for his beloved Tomo Nessen and Kenshin Sensei. He was crying because he loved this country because Kami loved it so much. He was crying because he would soon have to leave his cherished home and go to a new place where he would live in greater loneliness and despair amid the animosity of many. He was crying because he was happy that Japan had finally entered a peaceful era and that everything he had given up to make that happen had been worthwhile. Weeping, because if Kenshin and Tomo were still here, they would have been so proud of him right now. He was now at the gates of Konoha when he was stopped by one Chunin and 5 Chunin guards. Stop. One of the Chunin moved forward and started questioning Naruto as he stood in front of the Leaf Ninja. State your name and the reason you're here at Konoha. After giving him a long look, Naruto responded as he had intended. My name is Kansun Yozoma, and I was requested by the Hokage to meet with him. With one eye visible and gray hair that defied gravity, the Chunin moved forward. Is that correct? Well, then, I'll go check with him to see if your story is true, he said. Mr. Yozoma, just wait here, and I'll be right back. However, since the Hokage is the strongest ninja of all, it would have been wiser to have one of the Chunins go and tell him rather than the Chunin. Without the Chunin to help fight him off, it would have been much simpler for a strong foe to cut through the Chunins and enter Konoha. But before the Chunin had a chance to depart, a series of swirling leaf events occurred in front of Naruto and the guards. The Hokage was discovered standing there with 6 Anbu surrounding him. Hello there, Naruto-kun. How difficult it has been to locate you after all these years is beyond your comprehension. That you are back where you truly belong is a good thing. The Sandame and his Anbu escort then turned around and started walking back to Konoha's front gates. Now, come along, there is much we have to discuss. Hokage-sama, I thought I mentioned in the letter that I wished for my identity to be kept hidden? Naruto scowled at the Hokage as he fell in step with him. The 6 guards instantly stiffened when the Hokage mentioned the name of the young samurai. That can't be, the Junin thought. Is that the demon brat? After all, such a name is not common in the Leaf. In fact, I've only known the demon having such a name. Additionally, he had lied to us about what his name actually is. That's very clear since he wanted the Hokage to keep his name secret. That would make sense. The vile demon would probably did that to avoid the punishment he deserves from this village, but I need to be certain. As the Hokage and Naruto were about to enter through the gates, the gray-haired Junin suddenly moved in front of them. Is something wrong, Kakashi? The Hokage inquired. You mentioned that person's name is Naruto. Hokage-sama, is it possible that his last name is Uzumaki? Kakashi inquired. Hokage-sama, please do not reveal so much information about me, Naruto muttered. I'm sorry, Uzumaki Naruto, but if you're going to be staying in this village, people need to know who you are for security reasons, the Sandaime said, turning to face Naruto. You shouldn't hide who you are in your own house. Additionally, if you are acknowledged for who you really are, you will become more accustomed to returning to Konoha. You will thus become more attached to this village as your true home, and the residents and ninja of the Leaf will become more attached to you in return instead of being feared and hated by the people of Konoha. Don't you want the opportunity to gain their respect and recognition? As usual, old man, my needs have never really mattered, have they? As usual, you and this hellhole of a village decide what is for my own good, or my treatment is just ignored for some so-called righteous reason. I hate this, Naruto thought, recalling all the times he had been beaten in the Leaf while the Hokage sat in his office doing nothing in those days. The Anbu only intervened when he was either terminally injured or nearly dead. The guards clearly recognized the black-cloaked person by now, and they froze in disbelief and rage that the demon brat was Baka and being brought into Konoha by the Hokage, no less. Nevertheless, Naruto promptly responded to the Hokage's query before the Junin could say anything. No, Hokage-sama, I'm not interested. What I'm interested in is just protecting my true home, which is most definitely not here where I'm blamed for the actions of some overgrown fox, Naruto said coolly before going on, and I was interested in just living a simple life where I could be isolated and be living in peace, not having the burden of being a warrior anymore, before I had been forced to come back to this place. Disgusted, Naruto turned to face Konoha. The Hokage was about to reply to Naruto when Kakashi cut him off, so he simply signed with fatigue and reluctant acceptance because he knew he might have a disagreement like this with the young demon container. Hokage-sama, you cannot be serious about bringing back this to our village, Kakashi said, gesturing to Naruto. It doesn't belong here, according to some demon abomination. Before it ever poses a threat to us all, please exercise common sense and allow us to eradicate it while it is still present in the open. The 5 Chunin and Kakashi immediately assumed combat positions and got ready to murder the young samurai. Enough. The Hokage let out a long sigh and bellowed before continuing. Konoha benefits greatly from Naruto's presence. The council and I had to exert a lot of pressure on the Leaf to force Japan to release the Batusei apprentice. The name of the Manslayer made everyone around the Sandaime tense. Kenshin's identity and abilities were well known throughout the world, particularly because of his reputation for killing over 1,000 mina, something that few had and would ever be able to accomplish. All things considered, following the legendary Batusei's actions during the war in Japan, he had become one of the world's greatest swordsmen, surpassing even the 7 swordsmen of the mist in power. As a result, every ninja in all the elemental countries, from Junin to Genin, were aware of the Batusei's renowned exploits, and even the general public was aware of his fame. His reputation was simply equal to that of Konoha's Yondaime, who, when he was alive, was the greatest ninja in the entire world. Hitokuri Batusei and the Yondaime Hokage would have been a formidable rival in terms of skill and notoriety if they were still living today. After a moment's silence, the Sandaime said, Uzumaki Naruto himself is that very same apprentice, and he stands here before us today. The Hokage nodded in Naruto's direction. The infamous Kyuubi brat, the most despised person in the entire Leaf Village, was deserving of being apprenticed by a legend like the Batusei, and there was a long minute of silence as everyone processed this startling revelation. Granted, ninja believed themselves to be superior to samurai before Kenshin's status became so well known and outsiders began to take an interest in Japan's revolution. After all, ninja didn't just use one weapon for fighting, as they had seen samurai do in the elemental countries. They also used a lot of taijutsu and 2 primary weapons, kunai and shuriken, which could be thrown at high speeds instead of being wielded like swords. In addition, some ninja used special knives that are enhanced with chakra, such as those used by the third son, Asuma Sarutobi. Ninjutsu was another reason why ninja believed they were better than samurai. Ninja could create a wide range of short-distance and long-distance range attacks using chakra. Some could use ninjutsu for stealth, like the henjutsu. Others, like the kawarimi and bunshin jutsu, could be used for escape or to confuse the enemy. And finally, there are jutsus that could deal a lot of damage, such as those that could kill a lot of people with a single use. Some ninja were able to summon enormous monsters that could wipe out an entire village, and as the Yondaime demonstrated, summons could even be used to battle extremely strong demon lords, which was another reason why ninja were so conceited about samurai. The best a summon could do against such an enemy would be to provide a distraction long enough for the sealing of the demon to take place, and that's usually only if said demon is just playing with his enemy. However, it should be noted that Gambunta, who was summoned by the Yondaime Hokage, was only able to fight with the Kyuubi for a brief period of time before the Yondaime could seal the demon, and that was just when Kyuubi was playing with him. Gambunta had almost lost an eye as a result of his encounter with the nine-tailed demon lord. Since bloodlines were more common in the ninja community, ninjas assumed that samurai either lacked such power or that bloodlines were simply uncommon in Japan. If bloodlines were present in Japan, ninjas were so conceited that they thought the samurai either didn't use them to their full potential or didn't know enough to know that they even had a bloodline. Japan used to be very isolated in the world while it was in a civil war. However, thanks to all the missions requested from different groups in Japan for assistance from Konohas and other main villages ninja, Japan became very much more known to the world. Since Konoha was known to be the most powerful village in the elemental countries, its ninja were hired a lot in Japan. However, it should be known that the ninja villages would only choose the first fighting faction that made a request for ninjas, given that they didn't want to risk having their ninja fight each other if they were ever assigned to opposing sides in the civil war. Of course, there were times when a village would refuse to assist a specific fighting faction, because an enemy ninja village was already helping said faction. It's understandable considering that most villages from the elemental countries are only interested in the money that's offered from missions. They could care less about Japan's welfare or any such other moral concept. In Japan's civil war, even mercenaries and missing nins were employed to help one side of the conflict, and most of them would not be embarking on such risky missions out of altruism. Many of the ninja from the elemental countries who were hired to help in Japan died as a result of their haughtiness toward the samurai. In fact, they were shocked to see master swordsmen using only a katana to launch attacks that were as devastating as most of the ninjas' devastating jutsus. It was as if these samurai could use ninjutsu and fight with their katana simultaneously. It was simply amazinga and terrifying. After seeing the power that Japanese samurai possessed, ninjas from the elemental countries quickly realized that Japanese samurai were much different, especially more powerful, than the thug-like samurai they had grown accustomed to in their own lands. This was because ninjas had to frequently go through a set of hand seals to launch just one jutsu, whereas most of the time it would take a long number of complex hand seals for jutsus that are really destructive. No matter how quick a ninja was with their hand seals, they would always need to spend some time making them before they could use any jutsu against an enemy. This short delay was always the reason why many ninjas lost their lives when they faced Japanese samurai, as these skilled swordsmen could already finish a devastating attack with lightning speed before a ninja had finished using their hand seals. In summary, nearly every jutsus used by ninjas could be countered by Japanese samurai. While Kenshin and his apprentice fought with the Ishin Shishi side during Japan's civil war, Konoha's ninja had been supporting the Bakufu forces. However, it should be noted that Konoha wasn't sending an army of ninjas to aid in the conflict. Most of the time, they assigned missions requested by the Bakufu to a few squads of Anbu, but occasionally they would just assign these missions to 2 or 3 chunins and 1 or 2 jonins. However, because of Konoha's decision to support a warring faction, the Hikatori Batusei quickly became the most feared opposing samurai of all time, and his apprentice posed a threat to Konoha's ninjas and allies. Speaking of his apprentice, you can imagine how shocked and angry some Leaf Ninja were to learn that he was their old and local so-called demon brat. Needless to say, those particular ninjas were always filled with shock and rage when they confronted Naruto. The first group of Leaf Ninjas to confront him and discover his identity had only managed to hurl a few angry insults at him, such as Kyuubi brat and Demon Fox, before being pierced or sliced to pieces by his blade. Ninjas who confronted Naruto and discovered his true identity were therefore not allowed to flee. Instead, they were to be hunted down and killed right away. Kenshin became well known throughout the world as soon as news of the Batusei's existence and his exploits spread throughout all of the elemental country's villages, particularly Konoha. However, his apprentice's identity was eventually revealed as a result of his notoriety. Because of the trouble that the Batusei and his apprentice had caused Konoha, the Hokage and Council of the Leaf quickly started looking into their identities and other details, such as background, skill level, techniques used, etc. Since samurai at the time were respected and feared as equals to ninja, Kenshin posed the greatest threat to any ninja Konoha sent on a mission to Japan. As a result, it wasn't long before spies and ninjas sent out from the Leaf had a good idea of the Batusei's appearance, as well as that of his apprentice. Given how frequently and in-depth Japanese people talked about Naruto and his master, it wasn't all that difficult. The two samurai warriors didn't kill civilians, so those same citizens had never been silenced. Naruto had believed that as long as he wasn't fighting alongside the Batusei, no one would suspect him of being the Batusei's apprentice. But apparently people in Japan are smarter than the people he was used to back in Konoha. There were only a few occasions when Naruto and his master were seen by some citizens when he went somewhere with Kenshin and didn't wear his disguise. The ninja of Konoha obtained information about the Batusei and his apprentice by simply listening in on conversations with Japanese civilians. If that didn't work, they would have to resort to torture. However, at that time, discussions about the Batusei and his apprentice were so widespread in Japan that ninja from Konoha never had to think about the later option for obtaining information once a small group of Leaf Ninja, essentially Guy and Yamato under Anko, had gathered enough information to create a detailed physical description and analysis of the Batusei and his apprentice. They delivered it to the Hokage and Konoha Council. However, it should be mentioned that the Hokage primarily selected those three ninja because he had enough faith in them to keep any information they discovered between them and the council and himself. Obviously, confidentiality was crucial for this kind of work. As the Hokage and council itself reviewed the information provided by Anko and the others, there was undoubtedly a great deal of shock, anger, and confusion. This was understandable given that the information about the Batusei's apprentice's physical characteristics nearly matched the appearance of their former demon brat, who had vanished years prior. After all, how many other people besides Naruto had whisker-like scars on their cheeks, let alone a person with such birthmarks who also had blonde hair and blue eyes? The Hokage and council were somewhat perplexed at the same time, though, because the Naruto they recalled had short, spiky blonde hair. The Batusei apprentice had blonde hair, but it was long, smooth, and reached his waist. As the Hokage and council remembered Naruto, the Batusei's apprentice was also not a short midget. The council immediately went into a frenzy and demanded that the Hokage send hunter nins to Japan to find and kill the Kyuubi brat. After an hour of yelling and complaining, the Hokage finally had enough of playing the nice old man with overgrown babies and unleashed a massive outburst of murderous intent on the council to stop them. The Hokage then went on to tell the council that in order to be absolutely certain that their suspicions about the identity of the Batusei's pupil were accurate, they would have to send one of Konoha's Sanins to Japan to confirm that such suspicions were true. Ultimately, the Sandaime had told the council that rumors and claims from Japanese civilians weren't enough to completely confirm if the physical description given from the information regarding the Batusei's apprentice fit with the actual appearance of Uzumaki Naruto. Given that, aside from the Hokage himself, a Sannin would have the best chance of coming into contact with the Batusei or his pupil and surviving to tell about it, such a choice would make sense. The Hokage and council had selected Jiraiya for the assignment because he was the only devoted and active Sannin available, but even if all three Sannin had been available at the time, Jiraiya would have most likely been selected because he has one of the world's best networks for gathering information. To cut a long tale short, Jiraiya had barely survived his encounter with the Batusei and his apprentice. The apprentice was initially discovered by the lone active Sannin, who was delighted to discover that it was, in fact, Naruto. Jiraiya then went on to convince Naruto to return to Konoha. However, Jiraiya had only told him that he could either return peacefully or be brought back by force, and it appeared that he was too sure of his skills to actually try to persuade Naruto to return to the Leaf with him. Jiraiya was a Sannin, and he obviously believed that he could easily defeat Naruto because, if he was still an apprentice, the blonde-haired samurai's skill level had to be lower than the Batusei himself. Before waiting for Naruto's anticipated response of surrender, Jiraiya had even made sure to let him know that he thought there was a huge skill gap between them, with him being the strongest. But Naruto simply refused to return to Konoha, then slipped into the hidden Mitsurugi sword stance so that he would be ready to defend himself. Jiraiya stared in shock at Naruto's stubbornness before becoming enraged by what he perceived to be the spoiled brat's childish and arrogant behavior, and attacking him. After an hour of fighting, Jiraiya realized that the difference between his and Naruto's skill level wasn't nearly as great as he had thought. Sure, Naruto was losing, as he had concluded, but it was completely unbelievable for someone of his age to keep up with a Sannin in a battle for so long. Jiraiya and many others in Konoha would have laughed at the idea of a kid that young fighting a Sannin for an hour and still being able to fight. Not even Itachi, Kakashi, and the Yondaime displayed such power at such a young age. Naruto just had unheard of potential. In addition, Jiraiya lost half of his long, white, spiky hair in order to prevent the little brat from decapitating him. Nevertheless, Jiraiya believed that Naruto was only a low kage, and since the Toad Sannin was only a high kage, it was obvious who would win. As a result, just as Jiraiya was about to knock Naruto out, the Batusei appeared out of nowhere and started attacking the Toad Sannin at the end of the battle. Naruto was on one knee and only his katana, which was stabbed into the ground, was keeping him from collapsing. Jiraiya had no chance because the Batusei was on an equal footing with the Yondaime himself. The Yellow Flash had long since outperformed his teacher, Jiraiya, of course, and Jiraiya had already expended a lot of energy and chakra fighting Naruto. It seemed as though no matter what attack Jiraiya used against the little brat, he would still be standing and ready to fight again. Naruto could really take a beating. Naturally, he had greatly underestimated the blonde-haired kid at the beginning of their battle, which was one of the main reasons Jiraiya had so much trouble with him. Let's just say that the poor old pervert had suffered a long, deep gash in his back and chest as a result. It's true that giving a potentially formidable opponent a free shot because you believe you can counter it without preparing yourself to do so is a good example of underestimating. Therefore, Jiraiya's two deep injuries were likely another factor in his defeat to the Batusei. Jiraiya had wisely fled the area as quickly as he could out of fear after the Batusei's blade had reduced him to a bloody pulp and left scars on the rest of his body. The Toad Hermit was relieved that the Batusei was only concerned with keeping his pupil safe rather than pursuing him and killing him. It appeared to be a wise choice on the Batusei's part, since there might have been other Konoha ninjas waiting to murder or abduct his apprentice because he was weak. Jiraiya might have only been acting as a diversion to allow Naruto to suffer such a fate. Speaking of the Toad Sannin, he returned to Konoha after only 5 days in Japan to receive medical care following his altercation with Naruto and the child's mentor. In the end, Jiraiya had made it to the Leaf Village and informed the council and Hokage about his encounter with Naruto and the Batusei. Following Jiraiya's report, the Sandaime and the council were deeply troubled and terrified because not only was the Kyuubi brat already strong enough to defeat a Sannin in combat, but his master had also wiped the floor with that same Sannin. However, being able to verify that Naruto is, in fact, the Batusei's apprentice gave the council and the Hokage some reassurance. The rest is history after their discovery, which is what brought Naruto to his current position. The first to emerge from his astonishment was Kakashi, who then stumbled in terror. "You mean this thing was trained by that monster? The Hikatori Batusei trained the D-Demon brat. Hokage-sama, please be reasonable. This means that the demon brat isn't harmless anymore. He's dangerous. I'm sorry, but I can't allow it back in this village. We need to get an army of Anbu here and have them kill it right away." Since he believed that it was pointless to get upset over words when you knew they were untrue, Naruto didn't really care what Kakashi said about him or his sensei. Another reason was that Kakashi couldn't harm his sensei because he was already dead. As if Kenshin could have been touched by the one-eyed jerk in the first place while he was still alive. "Cease this foolishness, Kakashi." The Sandaime, who had screamed in rage, caught everyone's attention before releasing a massive dose of killer intent that froze nearly everyone in place. Naruto barely managed to dismiss the intent to kill since the Sandaime was essentially only at mid-cage level due to his advanced age. His level of power was actually lower than the Sandaime's. Seldom, in fact. "I am the leader of this village, and as such I am the one that makes those kinds of decisions. If any of you wish to take my place, then I can enact the old law that allows anyone in this village to fight me for my position as the Hokage. So if any of you believe you can take me on, then step forth right now." It should come as no surprise that nobody responded to the third's challenge. He was the Hokage for a reason, after all. Kakashi clenched his fists and gazed down at the ground with anger in one eye. He was aware that the Sandaime Hokage was too strong for him. He had heard tales of battles centered on the Sandaime from his sensei. Kakashi most definitely did not want to be among the adversaries that Sarutobi had eliminated. After hearing some of those tales, he couldn't possibly match the power of the elderly man, not because he detested the Sandaime or anything. Conversely, he held him in high regard and thought he was the most politically and strategically astute Hokage in Konoha's history. The Sandaime's inability to concur with Kakashi regarding Naruto simply irritated him. The Sandaime spoke again after a protracted silence. "That's what I thought. Now, as I said before, Naruto is very important to this village. This is where he was born, and like us, it's where he really belongs. I care very much about him, and that is why I did so much to bring him over here to Konoha. His whole life has been involved in that civil war over at Japan. He's even a hero over there, and he shall be a hero here. Naruto has lost a lot of his precious people at that place. But here, he will find new precious people and escape the horrible memories of war. Here, he will find a childhood that he never had. Naruto will live here in Konoha, his home, because his parents would have wanted him to be living here. It was his father's dying wish, and I will not deny that. Now, none of you are to ever mention to anyone that Uzumaki Naruto was the Batusei's apprentice. That is an S-class secret. I'm sure you all know the penalty for disclosing such highly classified information. Guards, out of my way. Kakashi, come with me. When the Sandaime brought up Naruto's father, only Naruto and Kakashi were aware of who he was referring to. Speaking of Naruto, he remained silent because he was aware that the Sandaime was uttering nonsense. Naruto was aware of the Hokage's hatred for him. It was visible to him in the Sandaime's eyes. Naruto was given the truth by Sarutobi's eyes. Even though his smile conveyed warmth and concern like all the ninjas and civilians in Konoha, the Hokage's eyes were filled with icy hate and fury. Reluctantly, the guards stepped aside to let them through Konoha's massive front gates. When they arrived in the Leaf Village, they were a sight to behold with 6 Anbu encircling him. The Hokage was moving through the street. Naruto was walking to his left, and Kakashi was walking to his right. The Hokage walked for a few minutes before stopping and turning to face Naruto. Naruto, I need to have a talk with Kakashi for a moment. It involves his rude behavior towards you. Why don't you go ahead to my office in the Hokage Tower and wait for me? Don't worry if you don't remember where it is. These 6 Anbu will escort you there, okay? Naruto simply stood and gave a nod with a kind smile. The Hokage joined him in speaking to the Anbu. Escort him to my office and guard him there until I arrive. The Anbu then encircled Naruto and guided him to the Hokage Tower. The Sandaime turned around and glared at Kakashi after observing Naruto and the 6 Anbu until they were out of sight. The intense stare of the Hokage made the one-eyed Junin shudder. Now you listen to me. I have worked to the bone with the council to get that boy Kakashi. He is a weapon that many villages would wage war with each other just to have in their possession. I will be damned if all the work I did to get that demon went down the drain because idiots like you are too angry to realize what the leaf could do with him. Do you realize that the only reason Konoha got him was because I planned ahead to attain him after the civil war in Japan was over? If I hadn't, other villages could have got their hands on the Kyuubi brat, and then Konoha would have really been in trouble. What would have happened if Iware Kumo got their hands on him? Tell me, Kakashi? Since you're so eager to make decisions for me as Hokage, what would we do then? Kakashi merely stammered before the Hokage went on. I'll tell you what would have happened. Konoha would have been lost. The least that would occur is Konoha losing the title as the strongest village in the elemental countries. We'd lose a lot of our missions to whoever filled in our former title. But if Kumo or Iware had him, I guarantee that they would destroy this village by using that filthy demon hell. Not even Tsunade would lose a bet on that. Kakashi retorted, but then why don't we just kill him, Hokage-sama? If he can cause that much trouble for our village, then we should finish what the Yondaime started years ago and kill the demon. He's still in our grasp, and yes, that monster trained him, but there's no way he can take on an army of our Anbu. If the demon brat is dead, then no other village can use him against us. Grabbing Kakashi by the shoulder, the Hokage gave him a shake. Fool! You still don't get it, do you? You honestly think I'll pass up this chance because of your stupid belief that this boy is the Kyuubi? Honestly, the Yondaime trained you. I think you would be able to tell the difference between a blonde-haired boy and a damn giant fox. With this freak under our control, Konoha's safety and strength will continue to exist. Never again will a village challenge us like you did. Enemies like Orochimaru will think twice before ever attacking the leaf. The Hokage shut his eyes and went on, demon containers from other countries will be too afraid to face against Konoha's might, because we have the strongest demon container of them all. One that was trained by the legendary Hikatori Batusei for Kami's sake. In fact, we're the only village right now that has a full-fledged Japanese samurai at our disposal. You've seen the power of those kinds of samurai. You know what they can do, Kakashi. Imagine what the Batusei and his apprentice could do. I'll even let you read the reports on it later today, but there's something else that I need to tell you. Whispering to the Junin, the Sandaime's face softened and sorrow filled his eyes. I know you hate him, Kakashi. Hell, I hate the little shit too. Feel comforted that you don't have to act nice to that demon brat like I have to you, and I know that the Yondaime was his father, but that doesn't matter since he's just a stupid weapon to use. It also doesn't matter given that he's just a demon. The Sandaime gestured for Kakashi to stop talking just as he was about to. No, he's not the Kyuubi, but anyone related to a demon so deeply as to have one sealed inside him is a demon himself. And I hate him because he's deeply associated with the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the demon fox who killed my predecessor and your sensei. The Yondaime was indeed a man that I cared greatly for. I saw him as my own grandson, and all that's left of his legacy is some demon freak. I suppose that's another reason I hate that damn brat so much. Because a lower life form like that little shit is the son of Minato, someone who was important and deeply loved by everyone. Of course, that's something that damn demon will not ever have, nor does some filth like him deserve it. I truly hate any demon. I've learned to hate them after the Kyuubi attacked. The destruction that damn fox caused is a testament of what demons are. They should either be killed or be used as weapons. In this case, this little brat is going to be used as a weapon. If you really want to know one of the main reasons I'm choosing the second option, it's because that was what Minato requested in his will. He had written it all out right before he went to save this great village from that vile and disgusting fox. So you see, even your sensei wanted this, so at least go along with my plan for the sake of his last wish, if not for the sake of this village, okay Kakashi? Kakashi sighed deeply and then bowed his head. Yes Hokage-sama, I understand now. I'll do this in honor of my sensei. Thank you for enlightening me, Kakashi replied. Kakashi received a back pat from the Sandaime. You're welcome Kakashi. You are welcome now. I still have the law regarding him in effect. No one is allowed to tell the younger generation, including Naruto himself, the truth of how the Kyuubi was sealed inside that brat. And no, I didn't make such a law because I care for him or anything like that. I enacted such a law so that I could keep Naruto convinced that I care for him. And everyone else will believe I care for that thing because I'm either too nice or senile. My reputation in this village is that of a caring old man after all. It's important that Naruto believes he has at least a few precious people in this village, so he'll be more loyal to it. That's why I have hired other people in Konoha to act as if they care for him. That way, Naruto will never even think about abandoning this village. If there's anything that demon will inherit from his father, it will be his loyalty and service to this village for the sake of his precious people. The only difference will be that as the demon he is, Naruto won't have any such people. Those same people will only act as if they care for him to ensure he never betrays us. Furthermore, by keeping almost everyone in Konoha believing that I can care for such a vile creature as that boy, there won't be a risk of someone leaking out information regarding my true intentions towards that demon back to him. After all, people would be tempted to share such a truth with that brat to make him suffer more, not to mention that information leaks and rumors usually run rampant in this village anyway. Do you understand all of this Kakashi? Kakashi looked around anxiously and said, Yes Hokage-sama, but is it really wise to discuss this with me in the street? He was shocked, though, that everyone walked by them as if nothing had happened in spite of all the shouting and fighting between him and the Hokage. After giving Kakashi and the Sandaime a somber look, a few Konoha civilians sighed and shook their heads in exasperation and turned to leave. As he listened to the conversation or what he believed he was hearing, one villager asked himself, why does someone so important like the Hokage care for some demon scum anyway? As I mentioned before Kakashi, I'm the Hokage for a reason. I had cast a cage-level genjutsu around us. It will make everyone around us think that I am scolding you for saying bad things about the demon brat. Don't worry, this genjutsu has not ever been broken or detected yet, and the people that I know of that possibly can break it are certainly not in this village, said the Sandaime, while reflecting on his Sannin pupils and Itachi. Damn it, I didn't even detect it, but then again, my Sharingan wasn't active. Besides the fact that you're not one of the few people that can detect it Kakashi, another reason for your failure would be because you seem to depend on the ability of that Sharingan eye of yours too much. I had made this genjutsu myself in such a way that not even the Uchihas would be able to sense it, except for perhaps the killer of that clan itself, and he's certainly not in Konoha at this time, the Hokage said with a grave tone before continuing. Now Kakashi, do you understand my plan now? I assume that we're on the same page. Of course Hokage-sama, though, I have to wonder, if you did tell me all of this just so that I would treat that thing differently so your plan will work, then why did you mention about fooling everyone into believing that you care for that demon trash? Why are you telling me of your true intentions Hokage-sama if you're not wishing anyone to know what you're really planning for the demon? Kakashi responded. With a heavy sigh, the elderly man appeared considerably older than he had previously seemed. As though he was aware that what he was going to say would give him a severe headache. You're going to be the demon's Junin sensei after he graduates from Konoha's academy. The demon will be paired with Uchiha Sasuke and Haruno Sakura, said the Sandaime. You will be one of the people who he thinks doesn't hate him, and you may act just neutral towards him, so you will. However, Kakashi cut the Hokage off before he could say anything more. No, replied Kakashi. The Hokage questioned, What do you mean, no, my dear boy? I mean no as in absolutely not. It would be one thing to act a civil towards that thing ever once in a while. But to be constantly in that demon's presence and still act like that all the time towards him would not work with me, please Hokage-sama. I'll even take another one of Sasuke's fangirls on my team if it means replacing her with that demon, Kakashi begged. Enough. I've had it with your whining and complaining, Kakashi. You're a damn Junin, for crying out loud, act like it. As ninja, there are always going to be times when we have to conduct a task we don't want to do. You're acting like a newly graduated genin. Remember your sensei's wish, you idiot. Remember that I have to act more than neutral to the little fucker. I actually have to be nice to the stupid thing, damn it. So don't you dare complain to me about this when all you have to do is act indifferent to the little shit. Am I clear, goddammit? The Hokage shouted. Yes, Hokage-sama, Kakashi sighed, but he felt sorry for the Sandaime because they had to be so kind to the demon filth. It was then that he realized his predicament with the Kyuubi brat wasn't nearly as bad as it could be in comparison to what the Sandaime is going through. Maybe it's better to keep in mind that some people may have it worse than you. When Kakashi realized this, he was grateful for what he had that the Sandaime and others would be jealous of. For example, the Sandaime will have to work hard to maintain the kind behavior for that thing, whereas he will only need to exhibit neutral behavior to the demon, the elderly man in need. Besides, this is actually a mission for you besides just a role for you as a teacher, the Sandaime continued. Normally this would be an A-ranked mission, but since the Batusei trained him, anything having to do with that butcher should be S-ranked anyway, so S-ranked it is. Recalling the reports that surfaced about the number of leaf ninjas who perished in the battle against the Batusei, the Hokage shuddered. They died horribly. The manner in which those poor bastards were killed was unbelievable. What a freaking monster that Japanese samurai was. Anyway, your mission will be to keep a close eye on Naruto. Make sure that he is always behind his teammates in terms of what you teach them. We need to make sure Naruto is only powerful enough to be used as a weapon combined with Konoha's forces. He can't be so powerful that he fails to need the assistance of other ninja against an army of enemies like his master was capable of. No, he shouldn't ever reach the level of his master as long as we stunt his growth, said the Sandaime. I'll just teach the little brat tree walking, sir, while Sasuke and Sakura will learn everything else, especially Sasuke since he belongs to the royal Uchiha line. The demon should be far behind them soon enough, just as the scum he is, said Kakashi. The Hokage gave a head nod. Yes, that will be fine, Kakashi. If Naruto suspects anything of that sort, then just come up with a good excuse or try to hide your intentions better, and be sure that your excuses are at least better than the ones you use for your late arrivals. Kakashi gave a quiet laugh. As you wish, Hokage-sama. However, after a moment of concern, Kakashi's face turned pale, as though he had remembered something. Sir, are you sure you could trust those Anbu alone with Naruto? You know that even Anbu ninja left alone with Naruto had tried to kill him before when given the chance. We don't know what will really happen this time, Hokage-sama. The Sandaime was limited to a single statement at this point, which reflected a flash of his brilliance. He will never be proud of that intellectual moment. Whoops! Kakashi simply gave him a forehead slap. With the Anbu and Naruto at last, Naruto and his accompanying Anbu had made their way into the Hokage Tower. There had been deadly silence the entire way there before they all surrounded Naruto in an attack position. Some of the Anbu had promptly locked the door, the window, and every other exit they were aware of when they finally entered the Hokage's office. Naruto simply regarded the circumstance with his usual dejected expression. He seemed to be anticipating that the Anbu would pull off such a prank. And who knows, maybe he was. For a minute, they all stood there while Naruto stood calmly and unconcerned. The Anbu took offensive positions. The group's apparent leader sneered at the blonde samurai after a period of tension. Demon, after years of waiting, our patience has rewarded us with your return, he declared. We can finally claim our vengeance, now that your precious sensei isn't here to protect you anymore. The Sandaime had already gave us information about you before you came here to Konoha. We already expected for Hokage-sama to be so senile in his old age that he would allow us to be alone with you. All we had to do was wait for the right time to strike. Just like right now. Any last words, demon? Behind their captain, the Anbu drew what few weapons they had, mostly swords and kuani. Incredulous at the Sandaime's folly, Naruto simply shook his head. The Sandaime Hokage was, of course, a skilled strategist. However, the Sandaime was at a disadvantage when it came to basic common sense, particularly when it came to other people's safety and confidentiality. Naruto pondered, but then again, the old man either deliberately intended for this to occur or didn't care that it might, because he believed in my abilities or because he hated me, maybe both. Anbu-san, if you choose to do this, I guarantee you'll risk a lot more than your ninja career. I am supposed to be under the protection of the Hokage as agreed with Japan under the treaty they made. By violating this treaty, You're most likely committing treason against your own village plus. Last time I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a gigantic fox starting back at me. The Anbu were not shocked that Naruto knew about the Kyuubi. They had been shocked already when Naruto spoke with the Hokage before about being blamed for the actions of an overgrown fox. They were over that shock now. Yes, I have learned of the Kyuubi and how it was sealed years ago. However, how I learned of it is none of your concern, and as a side note, the only time my sensei had to protect me was when I went up against one of your Sanins. I have already killed plenty of Junins and Anbu from different villages on this continent now. There was an overwhelming sense of killer intent emanating from Naruto, and his voice grew icy. I'm willing to forget any of this happened, so we can all just wait here peacefully for the Hokage to arrive. I'll warn any of you now, I don't give a damn about your fucking council or prejudice ways. I suspect that you people are only doing this because you believe I won't fight back, since all of you think that regardless if I fight or kill in self-defense, I'll be punished under this village's laws as the offender regardless of the treaty with Japan, which clearly gives me immunity in cases regarding self-defense. Naruto sighed and shook his head. Clearly the concept of completely holding your end of an agreement is lost on Konoha's ninja, so I will tell all of you this right now. Naruto took his sword out slowly. The blade appeared to still have ancient bloodstains on it, which unnerved the ninja around him and caused them to seriously reconsider their plans. If you choose the option of illegally ignoring that treaty by attacking me, I will not kill you, but you will be in very much pain, that I can assure you greatly. ANBU's leader scoffed. So, you're just a samurai, it doesn't matter what those stupid reports said. And those foolish claims of Japanese samurai actually causing loads of dead ninjas in coffins to be sent back to Konoha as hogwash. It had to be ninja from other villages that took out a number of our own. I refuse to believe that some lowly samurai is equal in any way to a ninja in the end. All those stories of you and your master, as well as the rest of those pathetic samurai in Japan, wielding flashy powers with their swords and such, it's all a bunch of horseshit. The samurai in Japan probably used some sort of illusions to fool stupid ninja into believing that crap about their so-called power, and I'll prove it now by killing you, demon. The Anbu leader pulled out his own blade and began to slowly approach Naruto. Naruto warned the idiot one last time. I warn you now, Anbu-san, the reason you'll be in great pain is because you'll lose some limbs. You'll never be able to be a ninja again. I will try to keep myself from killing though, unless I have to. The Anbu captain angrily declared. You'll be the only one in great pain, boy, after we're done with you. Before giving the order to the remaining Anbu behind him. Anbu squad. We'll attack him together, go, he shouted. Nothing took place. The Anbu captain turned back to his squad behind him and became enraged at what he saw, and his oh-so-shrewd reaction was, huh. The Anbu team was there, shivering as they backed away from the scene gradually until they were pressed up against the wall. See, Captain, one of them sighed and continued, we're sorry, but we're backing out of this. Don't get me wrong, we hate the demon very much, but the risks are just not worth it. I've heard about the victims that fell to that demon's blade. There's something about that boy, is something terrible. Somehow, and some way, I just know that demon is telling the truth. I was a fool to actually listen to your denial of the reports concerning the Japanese samurai. I'm sorry, sir, but I don't want to die the way some of our ninja did when they fell to those blade-wielding monsters. Some of the victims were cut up so bad that they were only barely recognizable limbs and pieces of carved flesh. I just don't know why I followed through with this in the first place. Feel free to demote me or unleash upon myself any punishment you see fit, but I'm not stepping another foot towards that thing. The Anbu looked at Naruto. The frightened Anbu went on talking. Please, sir, don't underestimate the Japanese samurai. The information and reports about them are all true. I told you before about it, but you just ignored it and somehow convinced me that all of it was just false rumors and myths. But standing before one of those samurai, especially the demon, I can just know, as if by heart and soul, that you were very wrong about those reports being false, sir, very wrong. The other members of the Anbu gave a nod of agreement. Before the Hokage and Kakashi hurried through the door and paused in disbelief at the scene, the Anbu captain simply glared at them and was ready to respond to his squad severely for being cowards. What the hell is going on here? The Hokage yelled, glaring fiercely at everyone in front of him. At least the Anbu captain deserves credit for not being intimidated by the Hokage's presence. The death of the Kyuubi brat, that's what, he scoffed. The Hokage made a sincere effort to halt the ninja's delusions. However, the blonde samurai charged at the Anbu captain with all of his might because he was too close to him. Naruto simply stood there, wearing that eerie, perpetually depressed expression, as though the Anbu captain's threat to his life had no bearing on the Manslayer's present misery, which infuriated the captain even more. An incredible and horrifying event occurred right before the Anbu captain stabbed Naruto in the heart with his sword. Even for Kakashi, who had dealt with Japanese samurai, it was unreal to everyone in the room. It was unlike anything anyone else had ever seen. It seemed as though time stopped abruptly for everyone except the Manslayer himself as the Anbu captain was ready to drive his sword through Naruto's chest. Then time returned. And blood was all over the office. A spine-tingling scream followed the scene. The Hokage's expression was one of shock and horror, as was that of everyone else standing next to him. Indeed, they had heard all the tales of the brutality and carnage perpetrated by the Batusei and his apprentice, and one might initially assume that they wouldn't be shocked to witness it after having heard about it. But it's completely incorrect. Hearing about an act is not the same as actually witnessing it being committed in front of you, because at that point, the image is truly embedded in your mind. That's when you truly understand what you've heard. After seeing what those with the hidden Mitsurugi Ryu are capable of, you can't help but feel shocked or horrified. The Hokage was inhaling deeply because it felt like his heart was about to explode from his chest. The Anbu's arms were on his feet. Yes, both of his severed and bloody arms were crossed as though they were a cross. Since his last ninja battle, the Sandaime had not witnessed so much blood. His captain's left leg continued to spill blood all over his arms and the remainder of his Anbu armor, causing one of the Anbu members to tremble. Before long, the man dropped the leg and passed out, his eyes rolling into the back of his head. The Hokage scowled at the actions of that specific Anbu. Even with so much bloodshed and gore, Anbu members were expected to at least maintain composure. Not one of them was fainting like a certain Hyuga heiress later on. He would definitely remember to demote that one to Chunin. He would never know how that guy even got Anbu. The Anbu captain apparently only had one leg left. The man was crying like a baby and was practically screaming bloody murder. He was pitifully pleading with Naruto for forgiveness and vowed never to harm or offend the Kyuubi brat ever again. After vowing never to offend him, Naruto's left eye twitched at the man's foolishness in referring to him by the name of that fox demon. Even though he would have killed him right then and there to silence him, a part of him told him not to, because the man was no longer a threat. He still believed that unless it was absolutely necessary, he should not kill. But ever since he had to return to Konoha, that consciousness had been gradually fading. It seemed as though darkness was covering his mind and his sanity was starting to peel off. In addition to what is left of Naruto's consciousness, the council would probably have him imprisoned or put to death. Whether or not he acted in self-defense, there are still plenty of Anbu or hunter nins who could defeat Naruto. He's deep in their territory. In particular, Naruto is merely at low cage level. After all, he might even face consequences for severely hurting his assailant. However, he would fight as hard as he could if he were to be killed or imprisoned for self-defense. After regaining consciousness, the Hokage gave the order for the remaining Anbu to transport their captain to the hospital. However, they gazed at Naruto for a few seconds before they left, and he returned the look. Then there was a silent consensus. It could also be referred to as a silent withdrawal. They would have told the Hokage a falsehood in the present circumstance, claiming that Naruto attacked them and their captain first. Both Naruto and them were aware that they were the ones who had originally planned to attack Naruto, but Naruto had remained silent about what they had done, as though the captain had suddenly lost it and attacked him. He might even be able to prove it. Given who Naruto is now, they believed it prudent to not undervalue Naruto because the Batusei and his apprentice were always cunning. As long as Naruto didn't accuse them of anything, the seriously wounded Anbu captain's team decided not to try to pretend that he was the one who attacked them. As for Naruto, he simply reasoned that if he pretended that the captain was the one who was going to attack him, then there would be a greater likelihood that the other members of the Anbu would not tell the Hokage that Naruto was attacking them all without cause. Confusion, headaches, and wasted time would be the only results. Overall, the Hokage was certain that the Anbu captain was the only one who attacked Naruto after interrogating him and the other Anbu members who were with him. Naturally, the Sandaime continued to punish the Anbu by giving them a week of D-rank missions for failing to intervene to stop their captain from harming Naruto. After all, the elderly Hokage still had to maintain his public persona of being concerned about Naruto. The Hokage turned to Naruto after the Anbu had gone to take their captain and his limbs to the hospital. "You know, it's going to take some work to clean up all of the blood in here, Naruto. I apologize, Hokage-sama. I had given as much warning as I could to him, but he still insisted on attacking me." The Sandaime exhaled. "I know, Naruto, I know, but you're not in Japan anymore. Nor is this wartime, something that I'm sure you're still used to. There's no use for you to still retain those sorts of reflexes around my ninja boy. The way you injured that ninja was disturbing, to say the least. I'm sure that's how you samurai spare someone's life in Japan, even if it's against someone on your own side. But Naruto, here, in the Leaf Village, if a fellow ninja attacks you like that, you just knock the person out. You temporarily disable them. We don't permanently end their ninja career, okay?" The Hokage took a seat behind his desk. The Hokage pointed to the blood-streaked walls and floor and said, That Anbu captain probably has a family to support. Being a ninja was perhaps all he knew. Had you not ended his life as a ninja so soon, he could have proven to be useful and valuable to the Leaf Village. Please try to follow Konoha's practice from now on, because you can't keep doing Thesa every time someone attacks you. Even if it's someone of Konoha that is attempting to kill you, I'm going to barely be able to keep the council off your back. Regarding this, Naruto, this isn't exactly a good way to gain the village's respect or acknowledgement. Naturally, the Sandaime had muttered to himself, more importantly, it's not a good way to keep yourself alive for being used as Konoha's weapon. In fact, it will probably be best if you don't retaliate at all, the Hokage said after lighting his pipe and taking a few puffs to distress. Therefore, from now on, don't defend yourself and wait for Anbu to help you if someone attacks you, whether or not they intend to kill you. Additionally, attempting to avoid them will only make your attackers more irate. Attacks that will kill you or cause permanent damage, however, can be avoided, only if you are certain that such attacks are that lethal. Otherwise, just take their hits until Anbu can show up to help out, the Hokage said, sighing before continuing. And don't worry, I will know when you're being attacked, and so will the Anbu. Do you understand me, young one? I won't permanently injure my attackers to the point where they lose their limbs or can't continue their ninja career, Hokage-sama, said Naruto. However, it will take getting used to, considering my habit to act towards attackers after living in Japan. With relief, the Hokage grinned. Excellent, I'm glad I can count on you, my boy, he said. Don't worry, I'm sure you'll define at getting over that, habit of yours. Now, come and sit down, there's some things that I wish to discuss. Fortunately, cleaning crews and maids had already cleared the bloody mess left in the office from the recent violent scene while Naruto and the Hokage were conversing. Not a shred of red remained. Additionally, the Sandaime simply assumed that Naruto had consented to refrain from attacking him or even to dodging any retaliation. That portion of his request was never granted by Naruto. Naruto replied, no thank you, Hokage-sama, I would rather stand. Very well, if you insist, replied the Hokage. Now, Naruto, the Leaf Village has searched for you for years and turned up with nothing, so you can imagine how surprised I was when I found out you were in Japan fighting in their war. As the Batusei's apprentice, no less. So, mind telling me how you ended up disappearing from this village and somehow ending up in Japan of all places? To calm his nerves, Naruto closed his eyes and inhaled deeply before opening them again and speaking. As you likely know, Kenshin-sensei was the brother of Kushina, a ninja originally from Whirlpool Country, and became a ninja here in Konoha. I know it was her that gave birth to me. It was my uncle, Kenshin-sensei, who took me away from this place when I was 4 years old. Yes, Kenshin-sensei told me who my mother was, as well as my father, so you don't have to worry about keeping that particular secret from me. I know that my father was the Yondaime Hokage, also known as Minato Namikaze. Before continuing, Naruto took note of the Sandaime's shocked expression. I also know that in the last ninja war, he was known as Konoha's Yellow Flash, said the man. Naruto scowled at the Hokage and said, it was Kenshin-sensei that told me all of this, but I'm sure that you were worried that he would. I suppose your worries are confirmed now, aren't they? The Sandaime cast a disappointed glance down. He had sincerely hoped that Kenshin, the red-headed jerk, would not speak about Naruto's ancestry if he hadn't known about his parents. It would have been much simpler for him to control the boy. It would have increased Naruto's admiration for him as a parent. The Sandaime believed that by continuing to see himself as an orphan, Naruto would be more submissive and less enraged with Konoha's people for their hatred of him. His chances of retaliating or betraying the village would be reduced. And because the academy's teachers would interfere with Naruto's education, the boy would think that his intelligence and skill set were inherently lacking. However, now that the young samurai is aware of his parents, Naruto is more likely to wonder about the intentions of both the Hokage and the academy's instructors toward him. Given that the Yondaime and his wife were renowned for being geniuses throughout their lives, that makes sense. For heaven's sake, the majority of ninja in the Leaf Village were aware of their intelligence and abilities. Now that Naruto is aware that the Hokage concealed such private information from him, it's even worse. And as the letter I had sent to you mentioned, I know of the fox sealed in me, said Naruto. Again, it was Kenshin-sensei that told me of this other little secret you kept from me, so now, I want to ask why you felt that it was needed to keep me in the dark about my own heritage, as well as why I hadn't known about having a gigantic demon sealed into Maya, unwillingly I might add, by your village's hero. The fact that Naruto referred to Konoha as his village, as if he didn't even consider it to be his own home, made the Hokage wince, as though he still considers Japan to be his native land. The Sandaime wanted to make it right in order to keep Naruto loyal. Not only unwillingly sealed into me by the Yondaime, but sealed just to save an ungrateful village. A village that looked upon me as low as the dirt they walk on just because I unwillingly saved their lives, which according to the Yondaime, should have made me a hero of this spoiled village now. I'm not much for heroism, Hokage-sama. In fact, it probably would have been annoying for everyone to acknowledge me for being forced to save them when I hardly did anything back then. I was just a mere baby and the Yondaime clearly did all the work to seal the Kyuubi no Kitsune, said Naruto. After lowering his head slightly, Naruto went on, after all, I like to be acknowledged as myself and to be respected for something I did. However, since my own father used me as an unwilling container for the demon, the least the village could have done was treat me as an ordinary child. I wouldn't even mind if they ignored me most of the time as long as they'd leave me alone and let me go about my business like everyone else. Disgust scrunched up Naruto's face, but no, as ungrateful as they are, they couldn't even do that. Their thanks was by beating on me daily, denying me service to their restaurants and stores, spitting on me and throwing insults my way, making me isolated by making sure none of their kids would be kind to me, refusing me medical attention whenever they had the chance, and especially the assassinations where I would usually be slowly tortured before being killed, and as if scripted, some random Anbu would just appear and save me before I died or be injured for life. By now, the Hokage was perspiring profusely. He was aware that everything was true, but he didn't want Naruto to know that he didn't give a damn about his suffering because he considered the child to be nothing more than a demon. All that mattered was that he could be employed as a weapon. That's all. The Sandaime came up with a quick lie to tell Naruto. Naruto, I couldn't tell you who your parents were because I didn't want you to feel as if you were in the Yondaime's shadow. Also, I didn't want to tell you because I didn't wish for you to become arrogant and selfish. The Sandaime then had the audacity to attempt to project an image of wisdom and compassion. I didn't want you to rely on your father's name to have everything handed down to you as a spoiled gaki, he stated. Not that you are spoiled or anything. The Hokage chuckled uneasily before continuing. I thought that you would become more humble and powerful if you were unaware of your heritage, which I see that you are. The Hokage thought, too powerful at such a young age, before continuing, your father had also mentioned in his will that he didn't want you to know of your heritage until you achieved the rank of Chunin. He continued, Chunin is a certain rank given to ninja. In actuality, the Yondaime's will did ask the Sandaime for information about Naruto's ancestry. It asked that Naruto remain unaware of his ancestry for the remainder of his life. The Sandaime Hokage, Sarutobi, regretted not being able to fulfill that specific request for the man he considered to be a grandson. But I was going to wait until you became a Chunin before I would tell you, the Sandaime replied. One of the main reasons I didn't wish to tell you before then was because I wasn't sure how you would handle the truth. It must be a lot to take in. After all, the same reasons are why I didn't tell you who your mother was, since she was also a legendary ninja of the leaf, maybe not as famous as your father, but she was still legendary. Speaking of your Mothera. Before he could tell any more lies, the Sandaime made sure to make his face appear dejected. I'm afraid your mother died giving birth to you. I'm sorry, Naruto. But you have no family left. You're the last Namikaze in Uzumaki. The Hokage mentally patted himself on the back and grinned in relief. Naruto let out a frustrated sigh. You're still keeping secrets, Hokage-sama, he replied. The Sandaime tensed. Don't even try to convince me that I'm unaware of Kushina's betrayal. My sensei discovered that she left the village a few weeks after learning that the fox was sealed inside of me. She wasn't brave enough to stay here and raise me. Kushina simply left me to rot in this village without leaving me a will or a farewell note. She clearly knew the kind of hell she was leaving me in, but she didn't even care. She didn't even look back or feel guilty about it. In fact, Kushina was pleased about being one of the main causes of the demons, Naruto said, sneering at the last word before continuing, suffering, as he examined his fingernails. I am also aware of this since my uncle confronted her a few years after she departed. He claimed that she expressed her true feelings and opinions about the demons spawn her own son. She left me here because she wanted me to suffer at the hands of this village, the blonde samurai said, pausing to light a cigarette. She was aware of the kind of life I would lead here. However, she was delighted and amused by my suffering and, Hokage-sama, don't even try to conceal that from me the way you concealed everything else. The person who told me the truth was Kenshin-sensei, the reality of everything. He was beginning to get a headache, so the Sandaime rubbed his forehead. Naruto, your sensei could have lied to you about Hera. He wasn't, Hokage-sama. Even though he was a very demanding commander and extremely harsh during my training, he never misled me about anything as significant as the Kyuubi being sealed inside of me or the identity of my parents. He was the one who told me the truth about these unspoken secrets. Kushina boasted to my sensei about being able to leave the village without being reported missing, which further suggests that she is a loudmouth. She boasted about how the Sandaime allowed her to leave her son to suffer while she was able to leave unpunished, Naruto said, opening his eyes to face the Hokage. At least I'm glad I didn't pick up her boasting tendencies. My sensei says she seems to talk too much. Why did you let her go from Hokage-sama? Would you kindly give me an explanation? The Hokage was now annoyed with Kushina because she couldn't really keep her big mouth shut and would often leak secrets or sensitive information due to her carelessness or arrogance. She also couldn't just talk normally. Instead, she had to shout out what she wanted to say, as if she had to make sure that everyone could hear her. The Hokage was silently grateful that Naruto didn't inherit such annoying behavior. Though it could be very annoying, at least Kushina wasn't a fangirl like those Harunos, which would be a nightmare to deal with. Despite all of her flaws, Kushina remained devoted to the village. The Sandaime considered her to be his granddaughter. In fact, he loved her more than any demon, so he was not going to sit down and let this filth disparage her. He never valued anyone's opinion if it was detrimental to the Yondaime and his wife. After waiting for the Sandaime to respond, Naruto received a glare from the elderly man, who said, "Young man, please never again speak of your mother in such a manner. She fought valiantly for Konoha and was a great warrior," he said firmly. "Try to be more sympathetic with the poor girl, Naruto," the Sandaime said. Softening his eyes, she was extremely upset following the Kyuubi attack, and her mental state was about to collapse. She thought you looked a lot like your dad, too much of your dad. Additionally, because she believed you to be the Kyuubi, she refused to accept you as her son. She continued to think that you were making fun of her by taking over her son's body as the Kyuubi. As a result, Kushina felt that her son was already dead. The Sandaime said after pausing to take a few more puffs from his pipe, "I made every effort to persuade her to stay in order to convince her that you were not a demon, just a normal human infant. I tried everything I could to prove to her that you were actually her and Minato's son." The Sandaime's eyes narrowed. However, she was always obstinate. She never wavered from her convictions once she made them. "I couldn't just force her to stay either, Naruto," the Sandaime said after pausing to let this information sink in. "She probably would have gone completely crazy and become dangerous if I had done that. She would probably do everything in her power to vent her rage on you, or worse, kill you. Additionally, she might have decided to leave the village and risk being reported missing. I couldn't let the woman suffer such a terrible fate because I loved her so much, Naruto. I had to pick the less of two evils. It would only get worse for her and you if I let her stay. So, with much sorrow, I gave Kushina a pass to leave the village," the Sandaime said, leaning back in his chair even more. "Although she is listed as inactive, she is still a member of this village's ninja force," he said. "I want you to know, Naruto, that your mother was in a lot of mental distress at that time. She is merely human, so please pardon her. She most likely hasn't returned yet because she's too embarrassed to confront you about having to leave so abruptly. That's it. Indeed, she must adore you. Naruto, give her a chance, please pardon her." The Hokage sympathized with the Yondaime's wife's reasons for leaving Naruto, which, of course, mostly consisted of their hatred for the blonde-haired baby. All the Hokage did was assist her in moving away from Konoha and further persuaded her to get rid of the child. She encountered no opposition at all. However, the Sandaime knew he was just making things up. In reality, he didn't blame the Yondaime's wife for getting rid of that vile demon scum. Naruto just shrugged his shoulders and said, "Hokage-sama, say whatever you want," Naruto muttered. "I'm sure I'll come to forgive her someday." However, the Sandaime failed to recognize the sinister undertone of Naruto's remarks. The Hokage grinned broadly and clapped his hands with delight, saying, "Great, my boy. You'll find it in your heart to accept her apology. I'm sure of it. That's the essence." The Hokage cleared his throat prior to continuing. "Well, we still have much to discuss, like your life in Japan, what all techniques you've learned and how to perform them, information about your sensei, if there was anything else important that your sensei told you, what places you've lived in at Japan, and Naruto swiftly cut the Sandaime off before he could say anything more, saying, "I apologize, Hokage-sama, but I would prefer to keep such information to myself. Given that you ninja are known to keep important information like that to yourselves, I hope you can understand. As I previously stated, Kushina's loud mouth was not inherited by me in particular. I don't want anyone to know too much about my sword technique or anything else I've learned. Simply put, I don't want to divulge details about anything that might be used against me in Japan. My life was just that. My life. I don't want to share it with anyone because it's personal." The Hokage was mentally furious with this little demon brat for his insolence, especially since he had insulted Kushina once more. Since demons are inferior to humans, they should give anything they come across to their superiors. How dare that brat be self-centered and not share what he's learned? Never mind that the Hokage himself had kept secrets from Naruto about his own heritage and fate of having a demon sealed inside of him. The Hokage was on the verge of simply beating the boy into the ground before demanding the brat to give up everything he had learned. And that damn sensei of his. He was curious about every aspect of that man, including his darkest secrets and the clothes he wore. Konoha's ninja would be greatly enhanced by any sword style or technique Naruto could impart. They could adopt the most lethal Japanese samurai fighting style into their own ninja style and undoubtedly have the strongest fighters in all of the elemental countries. With such power, Konoha would have a significant advantage that no other ninja village had. But all of this was being denied to him and the village because of some rotten punk of a demon who refused to submit to his superiors. No, there's no need for me to get angry over this. I should have known sooner that this demon would deny me such useful knowledge after he found out I held so many big secrets from him. Damn that sensei of his. If he were still alive, I would have legions of hunter nin track him down and end his life, the Hokage said after a moment of calm and relaxation. However, this is only a short-term setback, the Hokage said. All I have to do is manipulate the demon to be loyal to this village and me. That will just take paying off and ordering some people to be precious to that thing. Hey, like anyone would want to be precious to that thing. Yeah, I could just hold him in a cell and have Ibiki torture that brat to get the information I want out of him, but no, there are too many risks to that method. If I do that, he may become too unstable to be left alive, or the boy may be so mentally scarred that he will no longer be able to serve as a weapon. The Hokage scowled. I never really understood that damn seal Minato made. Another risk is that Naruto might have already been heavily trained to resist torture. He did fight in a very bloody revolution. After all, he might have been really tortured before. In that case, Naruto would definitely not be loyal to me or Konoha. After learning my true motives, it would probably be impossible to use him as a weapon then, and then there's the number of casualties that would result from all the Leaf Ninja trying to take the demon down so that he could even be questioned. No, I must maintain my composure and refrain from such drastic measures, the Hokage said, massaging his forehead. Time and patience will teach me the secrets of the demon. All I can do is wait and carefully consider my options. The blonde received a kind smile from the Hokage. Of course, I understand, Naruto. Besides, I suppose it's only fair after I wrongly kept secrets from you. Please forgive me, child. I was just so interested in the life you lived. Since I hadn't seen you for such a long time, I always wondered where you were and how you were doing. I care for you as my grandson. After all, when you were smaller, you used to come into my office and always tell me of your day. I suppose I'm still used to such behavior coming from you. You've just grown up too fast. The Sandame gave Naruto a sorrowful smile. Naruto let out a sigh. I suppose I've had to grow up fast. Hokage-sama, thank you for understanding. Is there anything else you wish to speak to me about? The Hokage gave a head nod. Yes, there is still current business we need to discuss. As you can most likely guess, I want you to become a ninja of the leaf. You fought one of my students. Does the name Jiraiya ring a bell? Yes, it does, said Naruto. He was the only ninja that has defeated me so far. The samurai with the blonde hair drew on his cigarette. He was a worthy opponent. The Sandame cleared his throat. Yes, well, according to him, you weren't easily defeated, Naruto, so there's no need for you to feel down over your defeat, he replied. Not to mention Jiraiya is one of the Leaf's strongest ninjas. The Sandame laughed, but Naruto just stared blankly at the Hokage, his expression unchanging. The Hokage let out a sigh. He could have at least responded to my joke in some way. Where's the demon's sense of humor, really? Well, whatever. In any case, Japanese samurai are just plain strange. Naruto, from your fight with him, Jiraiya told me that he's certain you're barely at low cage level. After I saw how swiftly dealt with that Enbu captain, I would have to agree. Would you agree with Jiraiya on his estimate of your skills? Naruto uttered the words, I'm not sure, Hokage-sama. Japan does not even have a ranking system like you ninja do in Japan. We judge each other's skill based on what we see and experience in battle. We don't judge others based on reported information from a ranking system. The Hokage gave a nod. I see. Well, in the ninja world, a ranking system helps us keep information about our ninja organized, he replied. For example, our village's enemy ninja ranking system may be able to provide you with information about the rank of an enemy ninja you are unfamiliar with. It can provide you with a useful evaluation of that specific ninja's abilities. Therefore, it's quite helpful if you don't know anything about a ninja you've battled. In this manner, you'll be more equipped to battle that same ninja in the future. Anyway, I'm starting to get off topic, the Sandame said, waving his hands in the air before continuing. Jiraiya is an expert at determining a person's rank after a battle. After witnessing how effortlessly you defeated that Enbu ninja, I'm even more convinced. Not even a captain. I will therefore have your skill level noted in some data files. After all, I maintain data files on every Konoha ninja. Now, just as you samurai have dojos for training and teaching, we ninja have an academy where people in our village can attend as students and become ninjas, the Sandame said, folding his hands on his desk and sitting up straighter in his chair. All of the fundamentals of being a ninja are taught there. However, since you are currently a samurai rather than a ninja, I will have to send you to the academy. Despite your strength and skill in this manner, you will be able to integrate the lessons you will learn at the academy with everything you learned as a samurai to become a leaf ninja. You will need to pass a basic test during your final year. You're a samurai, so I'm sure you're not yet familiar with the proper ninja techniques to pass this test. However, Naruto cut the Hokage off before he could say anything more. Naruto said, "I apologize for interrupting, but I'm certain that I know enough ninja techniques to pass the required test to become a genin. Excuse me, Hokage-sama. Yes, I am somewhat familiar with the ranking system used in this village as well as other fundamental ideas pertaining to ninja in general, and Leaf Ninja in particular. Returning to the subject at hand, Jiraiya ought to have brought up the fact that I used simple ninja techniques to defeat him, didn't he?" The Hokage narrowed his eyes, knowing deep down that Naruto was a good shinobi fighter and that he had already arranged for the blonde to be on a genin team. He had simply pretended that he was going to send Naruto to the academy in order to get him to confess that he had shinobi skills. Sarutobi would need to have a little chat with Jiraiya later because he was annoyed that Jiraiya had not told him that Naruto actually possessed shinobi abilities. No, he didn't tell me of this. Could you demonstrate your methods for me, Naruto? In addition, how did you start learning jutsus or anything else related to shinobi? In response, Naruto simply used a Kawarimi jutsu to swap himself out for one of the room's chairs. "I've learned mostly basic ninja techniques along with some fire and wind jutsus," he said. "Among these fundamental ninja skills is water walking. I'm interested in passing this test you speak of, Hokage-sama," the blonde said, blanching at Naruto's astounding advancement. "Before sending me to the academy, please give me a chance to see if I can pass." Sarutobi answered, "Well, students your age would be in their final year at the academy and taking their test to become genin. I suppose I can let you take it since you won't be left behind if you pass. This test will actually be administered in my office. All right, then. You must use the Bunshin Jutsu to make 3 clones, the Henge Jutsu, and a Kawarimi Jutsu in order to pass the academy. Naturally, since I've already seen you perform a Kawarimi, you won't need to do it." After a few more drags from his pipe, Sarutobi said, "Now, you may begin whenever you're ready, Naruto-kun." Because Minato always had an abnormally high amount of chakra when he was alive, and because he was the son of the Yondaime and the Kyuubi, the Sandaime was certain that Naruto would be unable to perform the Bunshin Jutsu. Raising an eyebrow, Naruto asked, "Is that all, Hokage-sama? I anticipated either torture or assassination." The Sandaime scowled and shuddered at the idea of academy students ever having to endure so much in order to become genins. The Hokage laughed, but he stopped when he realized Naruto was being serious. "No, Naruto-kun, I'll remind you once more that you are no longer in Japan. You don't have to worry about such things when you want to become a ninja here, even though it might have been your initiation to become a samurai." Naruto nodded in comprehension before he hanged and transformed into the exact replica of his sensei, down to the placement of the Batusei's sword and his vacant purple eyes. The Sandaime couldn't help but feel disturbed. It appeared that Naruto did too well with hanging into his sensei. It was so exact a replica of the original Batusei that the Sandaime swore he could have felt the imitating presence that the Batusei was always known to carry. Yes, it was too real. Naruto's sensei was a deadly man. "Okay, Naruto, that's enough," the Hokage said, growing uneasy. "You can now release the henge." Naruto then let go of his henge. "Go ahead and perform your Bunshin whenever you're ready, Naruto-kun," Sarutobi replied. The blonde swiftly executed the required hand seals and appeared to be paying close attention. "Bunshin no Jutsu," he whispered, proving that the Hokage was mistaken if he had assumed that nothing more unexpected about Naruto would occur. There were 3 flawless replicas of Naruto in the room. "I see," the Sandaime said, wide-eyed. "I was wrong to send you to the academy, Naruto. You truly did a fantastic job on this test. After all, it looks like you won't fall behind people your own age, Naruto. Who in the world taught you? You couldn't have learned everything there is to know about ninja fighting from scrolls alone, surely." "In actuality, scrolls taught me a lot about ninja techniques. When I first started learning about how shinobi battle, other ninja who fought alongside me did help," Naruto remarked, "so I learned mostly by just making do with what I had, Hokage-sama." "Well, I see. Excellent. I'll have to classify you as a genin because you never attended a shinobi academy or registered as a ninja anywhere. In any case, you would benefit from being around children your own age in 10 days. Make sure to report to the academy to ensure that the academy teacher teaching students in your age group is aware of your situation. I'll accompany you over there. Are you okay with that?" "I really don't care about rank, Hokage-sama, so feel free to take that course of action," Naruto replied. In all honesty, Naruto didn't care about the foolish ranks ninja employed. It's ironic, really. Ninja are supposed to be secretive and have trump cards under their sleeves all the time. Maybe ranking me as a genin is for the best. The ninja here are so dependent on their ranking system that they'll be likely to underestimate me, giving me the advantage of surprise. Yet, in spite of that, they rely on a rank system to judge their opponent's skills. They actually expect such a system to be correct and even act on it. For all they know, they could be underestimating an enemy just because he's listed as a genin when really, like myself, he or she could possess the skills of a Kage, and then Sarutobi bothers to brag about their ranking system. The only good a system like that can do is keep enemy ninjas underestimating me so I can defeat them more easily. Yes, the Hokage is actually benefiting me by ranking me as a genin. I can use the ninja's own ranking system against them. I'm glad we're on the same page, Naruto-kun, the Hokage said, interrupting Naruto's thoughts. Don't forget to arrive at the academy in 6 days. I'll personally take you there. Oh, and something else. The Hokage pulled out a leaf Hitai 8 from one of his desk drawers, grabbed it, and tossed it to Naruto. Well done. A ninja Hitai 8 is given to each student who passes the genin test. Oh, I nearly forgot. Please wear it at all times. Sarutobi said, I have already arranged for you to live in an apartment in Konoha for the duration of your stay. Groceries and other essentials are already waiting for you inside. The Sandaime gave Naruto a key and a piece of paper with the locations of Konoha's ninja academy and his new apartment. Now, I believe our meeting is over. Naruto-kun, Sarutobi stated, you are dismissed. Thank you Hokage-sama, Naruto said, tying his Hitai 8 around his left arm. I'll be taking my leave. The Batusei's apprentice bowed briefly to the Hokage before leaving the office. Any ninja that the Sandaime trusted with information about Naruto were promptly made public. It appears that Konoha's ninja were never able to keep their word to the Hokage when it came to the blonde-haired samurai. However, the Hokage never bothered to tell anyone about Naruto's background or anything similar. Within a few days, however, everyone in Konoha was aware of the whereabouts and identity of their local demon brat, the Batusei's apprentice, the one who had killed several Konoha's ninja. As one might expect, when the families of those deceased ninja discovered that the Batusei's apprentice was actually the demon brat himself, they became even more furious with Naruto. Indeed, those specific ninja had complied with the first S-class secret the Hokage made about Naruto, but after they found out who Naruto was in Japan and were told to keep it a secret, they felt they had had enough. To them, letting the Kyuubi kid roam the village was one thing, but the fact that he was the student of one of the Leaf's most deadly enemies was the last straw, and they became so enraged at the Hokage's actions regarding the demon that they disobeyed an S-class order. They never considered breaking the first S-class law the Hokage made about Naruto. They were so preoccupied with the second law that they simply forgot about it. Since almost everyone in the world now knew where the Batusei's apprentice was, it was likely that both samurai and ninja would travel to Konoha to test their skills against the young Manslayer. To be honest, the ninja who released such sensitive information were only doing so to harm Naruto. Some of those individual ninja had lost close friends or family members to Naruto and his master's blade, and they were too consumed by their hatred of Naruto to realize that they were endangering their own village by attempting to exact revenge on the blonde in this manner. Even worse, some people might travel to Konoha in order to exact revenge on Naruto for killing anyone they cared about. Many of them would likely murder anyone and everything in their path in order to get their hands on the sword that wields the demon container. Yes, it would undoubtedly endanger Konoha. The Sandaime had intended to keep Naruto's apprenticeship and his life in Japan a secret for a little while longer. The identity of the Batusei's apprentice was supposed to be a trump card, a way for Konoha to surprise their enemies, not to mention the obvious problems that would arise due to the revelation of the Leaf's new hidden weapon so soon. However, the Hokage took solace in the fact that at least enemies and potential traitors of Konoha would come to fear the idea of ever crossing the village. However, the harm done by those betraying ninjas was already done, and Naruto was now even more despised, if that was possible. Everyone was also aware of the exact cloak and hat that Naruto wore, so he was definitely no longer able to use that disguise. They also likely knew what he looked like without the cloak, since the ninjas who had revealed the second S-class secret about him had likely been told nearly everything about him by the Sandaime, who likely did this so that the ninjas could keep an eye on him in case he began to cause trouble or displayed suspicious behavior. It would probably be easier for them to know what he looked like if he ever chose to go out in public without his cloak on. It goes without saying that Naruto was the target of numerous mobs. But before long, those same mobs would turn into heaps of bruised and shattered bodies, unable to do anything but groan in agony. It was the mobs who had already been beaten to the ground by the time Anbu arrived, rather than the other way around as it used to be, and Naruto wasn't going to just stand there and be someone's scapegoat. Regardless of what the Hokage said, Naruto had already experienced a lot in his life and had come this far to his current level of skill. After 6 days, Naruto's Ninja Academy day had finally come. He had woken up and completed the routine exercises his sensei had taught him, which mostly involved meditation, push-ups, katas, sit-ups, and every other morning activity the Japanese samurai would perform afterward. He took a shower and cleaned himself up. The young samurai then got dressed, but instead of donning the same cloak and hat that he had worn since his stay at Konoha, Naruto finally made the decision to wear something different. As a result, when Naruto left his apartment and walked down the street, people stared at him because of his unusual attire, which included a full-length black kimono, a pair of black hakama pants, and a blood-red haori over the kimono. His katana was strapped to the left side of his waist in a black sheath, and it was customary for samurai to wear such clothing back in Japan. Naruto was going to proudly adhere to such customs wherever he was. The Hokage was waiting for Naruto when he arrived at the academy without encountering any mobs or thrown objects. The elderly man grinned warmly and said, "Good, you're here right on time, Naruto-kun," adding, "And I see you've chosen to wear something different this time. Although it's not typically worn by ninjas, I suppose it will work. However, I do hope you'll start dressing like a traditional ninja. Oh well, I'll show you to your appropriate classroom if you accompany me." Together, the Sandaime and Naruto proceeded through the academy until they came to the door that the Hokage was searching for. An academy instructor, a chunin with a scar on his nose, answered the door when the elderly man knocked and bowed to the Hokage. "Hokage-sama, what a pleasant surprise. What may I do for you?" The elderly man grinned. "Hello Iruka, I'm just showing Naruto-kun here to the class he'll be graduating with," he replied. "I personally administered his genin test and the boy easily passed. I know he hasn't even attended the academy, but he had already trained under someone very powerful. I assume you know who I'm speaking of, Iruka." The Sandaime then moved aside to give the chunin a chance to gaze at the boy in question. Iruka's eyes instantly became enraged upon seeing Naruto. Yes, he was aware of who this was. The whisker marks were a dead giveaway. Those marks, along with blonde hair and blue eyes, were unique. Iruka kept giving Naruto the most hateful glare he could manage until the Hokage cleared his throat to attract Iruka's attention. Yes, the Batusei's apprentice. He, somehow learned enough ninja techniques to graduate the academy and be given the rank of genin. Don't ask me how he learned, I can talk to you about that later. Iruka turned pale. But Hokage-sama, really, allowing the student of a mass murderer to interact with mere children, that's absurd. Please be reasonable, Hokage-sama. Someone of his caliber should be placed in the Anbu or Hunter Nin division, but placing him on a damn genin team is outrageous. That's enough, Iruka, the Hokage replied coolly. By placing him on a genin team, he'll be around children his own age, he stated. It actually would have been a worse decision to give Naruto a high rank like Anbu. Look at what happened to Itachi when he moved up the ranks so quickly. That thought made Iruka flush, and the Hokage went on, "Now, I'm not saying that anyone who achieves a high rank at such a young age will just snap and go psycho, but I suspect there is a possibility. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but it's better that I don't take any chances, especially after the ordeal Naruto had been through at Japan with the revolution and all." After lighting his pipe, Sarutobi started to smoke, and besides, Naruto will become more accustomed to working in a team with ninjas instead of samurai if he's assigned to a genin team, he added. Overall, I believe Naruto will learn how to be a child again and not grow up too fast. He needs to drift away from his ways as a samurai and fit in with Konoha's culture. He needs to be normal, instead of a foreigner. Iruka, however, persisted in his argument. "Hokage-sama, I'm sure that thing will never be normal, nor will a monster like him ever fit into Konoha. It's a waste of time and Before the academy teacher could say anything more, the Sandaime cut him off. "I said that's enough, Iruka. Let's talk about this outside. Naruto, how about you go into the classroom and wait for us? Just stand by the teacher's desk. There's something important I need to discuss with Iruka." As he entered the classroom, Naruto simply shrugged his shoulders and showed no concern. Iruka attempted to object, but the Hokage slammed the door shut and gave Iruka a savage look as soon as Naruto walked into the classroom. The teacher simply gulped in terror. In the meantime, in the classroom, after hearing a portion of the Hokage and Iruka's conversation, everyone in the classroom was perplexed. However, as of yet, they were unaware that Naruto was an apprentice of the Batusei. Why was this Naruto child graduating with them so significant? Was he so powerful that he belonged in the Hunter Nin or Anbu division? Is the Hokage's belief that he would benefit more from being around people his own age the only reason he was given a genin rank? Before the object of their thoughts entered the classroom in silence, the recently graduated students had a lot of questions on their minds. The classroom fell silent at once as Naruto sat on Iruka's desk and waited. A boy with a dog on his head broke the stillness. "Hey you! Is your name Naruto?" All of the students became tense as the samurai in question reached into his haori, and then they all formed a sweat drop when Naruto took out a lighter and a pack of cigarettes. Naruto took a cigarette, lit it slowly, took a long drag, and then coughed out a stream of smoke. The dog boy, meanwhile, was tapping his foot impatiently on the floor. The dog boy demanded, "Hey, are you going to answer me or keep smoking that stupid stick of yours?" Before responding, Naruto carefully took another drag from his cigarette while smoke billowed from his lips and surrounded him. Yes, my name is Naruto. After that, the blonde resumed smoking his cigarette. By now, every girl was gazing at Naruto with lust. When Sakura, a devoted Sasuke fan, saw Naruto, she couldn't help but think of one word. Glorious. As she gazed dreamily at the blonde child, a Hyuga woman named Hinata was experiencing similar thoughts. A blonde girl named Ino was already forming drool on her desk, and none of the other girls could stop it. He moved his head back and forth, a bang of hair falling on both sides of his face as his long, silky blonde hair, tied in a ponytail, waved with exquisite grace. Additionally, a few hair stands dropped in front of his face. His intense, glistening blue eyes gave the impression that they could see right into your soul. His voice was as quiet as a whisper and as serene as a light wind. His face was nearly flawlessly chiseled, with hardly any baby fat on it. However, the most striking thing about this blonde boy was the dejected look he frequently had on his face. However, Naruto didn't seem to care about his appearance. No longer did he even comb his hair. He was a living example of how some people are simply born to be beautiful. However, the girls in the classroom found him even more attractive. As a result, his hair would have been spiky everywhere, of course, if he had cut it. However, after allowing it to grow long, he had found that it was now largely silky and smooth. Sakura, a foolish-looking girl with pink hair, was only able to recognize a few of Naruto's characteristics before she snapped out of her perverted reverie. She later chastised herself in her head for having the audacity to gaze in that direction at a boy other than Uchiha Sasuke. She came dangerously close to committing blasphemy against her own religion of worshipping Sasuke. Sakura detested the attractive man right away. Only Sasuke had the authority to force her to think such things, and this person unexpectedly entered her life and dared to challenge her beliefs. How could he? Sakura was giving Naruto a furious glare when she started comparing his smooth hair to hers, which made her despise him even more. The outcome did not sit well with her. What the hell? I'm not as good at hair as that guy is. What is his secret? Sakura pondered. I've tried everything to make my hair look as gorgeous as his. He's not even female. Nevertheless, he still looks good with that hairstyle. It's unfair. It's simply unfair. That's the kind of hair I want. Goddamn him. I'll figure out a way to make my hair look as gorgeous as his. Blondie. You just have to wait. Sakura felt jealous of the blonde's beauty and sneered at him. Hey you. Sakura cried out. Naruto's gaze shifted to the girl with pink hair who was standing out of her desk and angrily pointing at him. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Blondie. Tell me the secret with your hair, asked Sakura. How did you get it like that? Was it a special shampoo or what? As they waited for Naruto's response, every girl in the classroom leaned closer to their desks now that Sakura had raised the question. The girls couldn't help but compare their hair to Naruto's and feel a little envious. Nevertheless, they continued to gaze at him with lust. After a brief moment of introspection, Naruto returned his focus to the Banshee who had asked him the question. Actually, I'm not sure myself. All I did was allow my hair to grow out, replied Naruto. Where I come from, we don't have any of this shampoo you speak of though. I have become interested in trying it ever since I've heard of the cleaning liquid. I've always had to rely on just using water to rinse my hair. Indeed, Naruto had visited the library numerous times to learn about Konoha culture. As absurd as it may sound, shampoo was a part of that culture. Before Sakura spoke up once more, the girls all looked at Naruto in shock and disappointment. Buddha, how is that possible? It's not fair. I've tried everything with my hair and I never could get it to look that good as yours. It's just not fair. You shouldn't be able to achieve such perfect hair without doing any work on it. All you did was let it grow out, that's all. With grim expressions on their faces, each girl nodded in agreement. They were eager to learn how to achieve that flawless hair, but it appeared that only a select few were capable of doing it. Sakura simply carried on with her tirade. You're just lying, aren't you? That's what it is, you selfish bastard. You don't want to share your secrets to such perfect hair, is that it? You want to be the only one with such hair so you can flaunt it around and make us look like hags. So, you can feel like you're better than anyone else. Well, guess what? At least my hair has something yours doesn't have, loser. My hair is pink. What do you think about that? Huh? Guess you're real jealous now, aren't you? No one else here has a unique color for his or her hair like I do. So take that, ha ha ha. Sakura was laughing uncontrollably by this point, and her eyes were gleaming crazily in an ineffective attempt to make fun of Naruto. The girl was standing on her seat and waving her behind at him. I bet you're impressed now, aren't ya, you blonde baka? Sakura's display failed to impress anyone in the classroom. Rather, they were all thinking that she had finally lost it. Even Ino felt sorry for Sakura when she compared herself to Naruto. Many of the students started to believe she was so preoccupied with her appearance that she was going into deep denial. The girl, poor thing. After giving Sakura a pitying shake of her head, Ino sighed with longing and gazed dreamily at Naruto. "Whatever, forehead girl. You can have Sasuke," she replied. "That hot beauty is going to be mine. Blondes stick together better after all." Sakura sat back in her desk, glared at Ino, and immediately stopped making a fool of herself. "So what? Are you saying that Baka is better than Sasuke-kun? No one can compare to the power of Uchiha Ino Pig. So go ahead and have that nobody see if I care. That still doesn't make us friends, Ino. I'm already pretty unpopular enough, so I don't even need you. Sasuke-kun is everything to me obviously. If you were able to fall for some stupid blonde because of his soft and smooth hair, angelic voice, the most beautiful blue eyes to ever be seen, delicious lips Ino put a smug grin on her face in an attempt to hide the hurt she felt from Sakura's rejection of her friendship, whispering, "See what I mean, forehead girl," she said. Sakura stared dreamily at the blonde samurai for a moment before shaking her head. "I mean, that's not the point. I was just guessing at what you were thinking of him. It wasn't as if I see him in that way or anything," she replied. "He's just some random baka. That's all. Go ahead and have him, Ino. But don't think that makes us friends or anything. I still don't need you anymore. Sasuke will always be better than that loser." The other girl's words wounded Ino, who scowled after acknowledging that she was now pursuing Naruto. She genuinely anticipated that Sakura and she would rekindle their friendship. She had assumed that Sakura's behavior toward her was solely a result of their crush on the Uchiha. However, it appears that Sakura has undergone significant change from the quiet, adorable, and benevolent youngster she was years ago. Ino was now certain that Sakura had undergone a negative transformation. The girl was a bitch who would probably leave her friends at any moment. Ino came to the realization that the young girl she had known years prior had passed away and had been replaced by a cold-blooded, self-centered betrayer. Despite Ino's pleas for them to stay friends, Sakura ended their friendship over the Uchiha. Ino was the one who would now leave. With tears welling up in her eyes, Ino kept glaring at Sakura. "Fine, I don't need a backstabber as a best friend," she growled angrily. "I guess I really don't know you anymore, Sakura. You're just another stranger to me. Now go and be with your damn Uchiha. I don't care anymore, but just remember that if it weren't for me, you would still be the same shy little girl I met years ago, the same girl that I stood up for against all those bullies that picked on you. But maybe I should have just left you as you were. You certainly were a better person back then, way more than you are now." On the far side of the room, Ino bounded off to take a seat at another desk. The blonde girl simply sat down and pouted after finding one. "Good riddance." Wait, did that pig just refer to me as Sakura? Sakura thought. Oh hell no. Well, Sasuke now, revenge later. She then returned to her regular routine of blushing while gazing at Sasuke. "Sakura is right. For once it's not fair. I'm the last loyal Uchiha, yet I have this terrible hair. I mean, it looks like a duck's butt. Damn that blonde. He was able to achieve perfect hair like my brother. I was supposed to be the one that got cool hair like that, not some nobody. It's just not right, damn it," he said, glaring at the blonde himself. "And now, I'm only to be reminded of it again when that damn blonde does the same thing. Just like Itachi, he never even had to use any shampoo for it. It just came naturally. I've always used herbal essence and hair conditioners, but I could never get my hair to look that cool. Why me?" The Uchiha glared at Naruto even more. Before long, the girls in the class were fighting over who was hotter in relation to Naruto and Sasuke, and the boys were hiding beneath their desks. Iruka finally slammed the door open in a fit of rage and performed his big head jutsu while books and pencils were being thrown everywhere. "Quiet." Iruka pulled his hair in frustration, and the class fell silent again in an instant. The Chunin walked to his desk and sat down after taking a deep breath. The blonde sitting idly on the teacher's desk was still unheard of. Iruka, on the other hand, was much more concerned. In summary, the Hokage had essentially explained his true intentions to the Chunin in the same way that he had explained them to Kakashi. It goes without saying that Iruka was a nervous wreck by the end of their conversation. Reluctantly, however, he complied with the Hokage's request. Despite his best efforts, Iruka was unable to resist the allure of the Sandame's schemes with regard to the young samurai. Aside from that, Iruka had to obey the elderly man's commands because he was the Hokage. It wasn't like he was going to like it, though. Iruka spoke to Naruto as soon as he was certain that everyone had closed their traps. "Excuse me, young man, but could you get off my desk and introduce yourself to the class?" Naruto gave a nod and got to his feet. "My name is Naruto and I have been deemed efficient enough to graduate with this class to become a ninja," he replied. "That's all any of you need to know." When Naruto made a clumsy attempt to introduce himself, everyone's perspiration dropped. Iruka sighed in frustration as a headache began to set in. "It was going to be a long day, Naruto. Do you wish to share anything else about you that perhaps my students should know?" Naruto gave a headshake. Iruka sighed once more. Fine, but I'll finish your introduction for you. He replied, this is Uzumaki Naruto. Class. Although he was born in the Leaf, he had recently relocated from Japan before being transported to Japan. Naruto spent his first 4 years of life in this village. You seem to be realizing who he is. Shikamaru. Oh no, it can't be. How could the Hokage allow it? The lazy boy said, going pale with fear, clearly knowing who the blonde was now. Students, Naruto was abducted here and transported to that nation by a Japanese samurai by the name of Himara Kenshin at just 12 years old. This boy is a real Japanese samurai. He participated in the recently concluded Japanese Revolution. You've all probably heard about it, as you can imagine. He has prior combat experience and has killed. Everyone, including Sasuke, gasped at the idea that a real Japanese samurai was enrolled in their academy. Everyone, this is the Batusei's apprentice that I'm sure everyone has heard about by now. The entire class was anxious by this point, and many of them were even terrified. Yes, they had heard about the Batusei and his pupil from their history classes at the academy. The Batusei's abilities were well known throughout Konoha and the rest of the world, but they had learned very little about his apprentice outside of the fact that he was deemed dangerous enough to be at cage level and had killed a significant number of Anbu, Chunins, and Junins in Konoha. In their ninja academy's history lessons, only the ninja villages that had sided with the Bakufu forces in Japan and lost ninja to the Batusei's apprentice provided more details about him than just his existence. Returning to the present, however, Iruka's class was even more taken aback by the Batusei's students' youth and the fact that they were born in their own village. However, the kids were genuinely unaware that the Batusei's apprentice was even in their village at the moment. However, the parents of the children never really bothered to tell them of the troubling news because they all felt that it would be better if they were unaware of the Batusei's apprentice's mere presence in their village. After all, they assumed that since Naruto had spent the majority of his life under the Batusei's tutelage, the demon brat would be listed in the village's Anbu or other advanced ninja divisions, so they never really thought of bothering to tell their children that the Batusei's apprentice was in the Leaf. They also didn't mention it because they didn't want their children to feel as anxious and afraid as they were, essentially not wanting to start a major panic. In addition to the fact that many of Konoha's children were so conceited that they tended to forget anyone they met who they considered to be extremely beneath them, Naruto did appear familiar to many of the students in the class who had disregarded and mistreated him when they were all younger. However, their encounter with the demon container was so long ago. Even though their parents had given them a description of the child they should avoid, it was pitiful that they were unable to recognize him as Naruto so quickly. Naruto should still be identifiable by his distinctive blue eyes and whisker marks, which no one in the village possesses. But, as previously stated, it was extremely rare to be honest, and these people are supposed to be ninjas? At least a handful of the more intelligent students were able to recognize Naruto based on the information provided by their parents, who cautioned them to avoid a child named Uzumaki Naruto. There were only 3 students in the entire class: Hinate, Shino, and Shikamaru. Sad. I assume that you all are aware of the Batusei's student being in this village, Iruka said after pausing to let his revelation sink in. Many of the students, who had absolutely no knowledge of this, simply shook their heads negatively. Iruka scowled in perplexity, certain that every parent in the Leaf would tell their kids about Naruto's presence in the village and his role as the Batusei's apprentice, especially since he possessed the Kyuubi. Iruka found it incomprehensible. That's odd, I was for sure that you all wouldn't be in the dark this much. Iruka-sensei, my parents told me nothing, Sakura screamed, but they sure have a lot to answer for when I get home. She glared at her desk and crossed her arms, feeling betrayed that her parents didn't trust her to know such crucial information. But she refused to be afraid of Naruto because the pink-haired girl was convinced that Sasuke would keep her safe, allowing her to treat the blonde however she pleased. Yes, well, none of you need to be afraid, Iruka said, clearing his throat. It seems that everyone in Konoha had known for days that Naruto was in this village, with the exception of many of you. After having him take the graduation exam, the Hokage gave his approval for him to be a Leaf Ninja, and I also agree with him. Thus, none of you should be concerned. I don't know why none of you were told that the Batusei's apprentice was present. What I do know is this, Iruka said, getting up from his chair and moving to the front of his desk. Yes, you would normally assume that someone with the dia, that is, Naruto's power, should be promoted to Junin right away, perhaps even join the Anbu program or train to be a hunter nin. However, he will begin as a genin like all of you because of the history of giving someone as young as him such a high rank, and because it is in Naruto's best interest. I concurred with the Hokage that. But before Iruka could finish, Sakura got up and angrily interrupted him, saying, "But Iruka-sensei, it's still unfair that he graduates with our class, while the rest of us had to spend years at the academy," she screamed. "Simply put, you're favoring the person who trained him." Sasuke-kun ought to have graduated instead of attending this pointless institution. I have a Sasuke-kun who is Uchiha. Whoever trained that stupid jerk is irrelevant. He still pales in comparison to Sasuke-kun. I insist that you put him through the academy first. There should be no opportunity for him to jump ahead. The fact that the damn Kyuubi kid was in Konoha, trained by the monster who killed many of Leaf's ninja, and was then assigned to a genin team was enough to make Iruka's day extremely stressful. To top it all off, the kid was supposed to graduate with the class he was teaching. The Hokage's plan may have sounded fantastic at the time, but Iruka was still uneasy about the risks involved with the blonde boy, and his best friend Mizuki was not present to assist him with the class today. He just vanished. The poor Chunin teacher simply lost it after Sakura's brief outburst. Sakura, please stop talking, never again will you interrupt me. I had previously discussed Naruto's circumstances and why he doesn't need to attend the academy. Naruto learned from ninjas from various villages, so even though he was trained as a samurai, he had acquired enough ninja skills to pass the graduating exam. Absolutely. I think he's more than capable of becoming a genin. And when you said that Sasuke should have graduated without attending the academy, you were a damn hypocrite for daring to accuse me of favoritism. Iruka shouted. I really don't care about any comparison between Sasuke and Naruto, as long as they do their damn job as ninja. The academy instructor scowled at Sakura. You stupid girl. It's not even any of your business. He yelled. I'm sick of hearing your nonsense every day. So take a seat, stop talking loudly, and pay attention. Their academy teacher had never been that angry. He was usually calm and only occasionally yelled at his class, but those few instances were never nearly as intense as his anger had been towards Sakura. It seems like there were many times today when the class would go completely silent. Speaking of Sakura, she had been in trouble very infrequently before, so she had quickly sat down and looked down in embarrassment. As I was saying, before being rudely interrupted, the Hokage and I agreed that Naruto needs to work with fellow ninjas that are his own age, Iruka said to the class after giving Sakura one last glare. Iruka was breathing heavily and his face was red with anger, which felt so good to let out. He had longed for years to put Sakura in her place. Given how quickly he grew up to survive during the Japanese Revolution, it would be a significant change for him. He truly didn't have a childhood like all of you, as the Hokage pointed out. Naruto will be the dead last of the class instead of Kiba, Iruka said, pausing for a few seconds to give the class time to process the information. Kiba cheered. However, keep in mind that Naruto is only given that status since he never attended the academy. He had spending most of his life training under the Batusei and fighting in Japan's recent revolution. There's no telling how far Naruto would come if he had gone to the academy with all of you. Iruka turned to the blonde. Naruto, is there anything else you wish to share with the class? Anything any of us should know? He inquired. No, everyone knows enough about, Naruto said, shaking his head. I'm sorry to interrupt Naruto, but I just noticed that you're carrying your sword with you, Iruka said, pointing out that everyone in the room is still regarded as a student until they are picked up by their Junin sensei because this is the last day of the academy for this class. I'm afraid you're not permitted to bring your sword into the academy because you're enrolled in this class except for the most basic ninja weapons, such as kunai and shuriken. Students are not permitted to bring any other weapons into the classroom. Sakura snidely remarked to Iruka just as Naruto was about to reply. But Iruka-sensei, I thought you already said that you didn't like being interrupted. But here you are, doing the same thing to the dead last. Sakura asked Iruka-sensei. I guess you're the hypocrite now. Iruka resembled a tomato in no time, and it seemed as though steam was leaking from his ears slowly, very slowly. Iruka turned to face Sakura, wearing the most terrifying expression she had ever seen on a man. At that moment, Iruka looked absolutely terrifying, and the majority of the students started to back into their seats as far as they could. The man was even releasing enough killer intent to freeze many people in place. Sakura simply swallowed. She was never sure when to stop talking. That's it, Sakura, Iruka said in a cold, quiet voice, and Sakura became even more terrified. I've had enough of your backtalk, your loud mouth, your ear-piercing screeches, and all your talk of some boy, he said. While the raven-haired boy hoped he would avoid becoming entangled in this, Iruka gestured to the stoic Uchiha. Suddenly, Iruka yelled at Sakura and slammed his hand on his desk. Leave. What are you saying? Get out. Sakura stumbled. Sakura, I meant exactly what I said. You'll be standing outside the front of the academy because you're being such a big problem today. Iruka shouted. I simply can't take your irritation any longer while you wait to find out which genin team you'll be assigned to and who your Junin instructor will be. I'll have a Chunin keep an eye on you. Go now. Sakura was approached by a Chunin who was standing in the rear of the room. But sensei, I told them to leave. Sakura started crying in shame, but then she became enraged and glared at Iruka while her lips quivered and her eyes watered. Iruka just gave her a glare. In return, Sakura suddenly growled at Iruka, saying, "You won't get away with this. Both my parents and I are highly significant in this village. You will pay for crossing me, you lowly chunin. This is something I will never forget." Sakura stomped through the classroom, opened the door, and then stepped through it before slamming it shut as loudly as she could. Sakura was swiftly followed by the chunin who had been standing next to her earlier. Iruka shook his head and muttered under his breath, simply glaring in her direction. "Bitch." Thanked Kami that the majority of the Haruno family was killed in the Kyuubi attack, Iruka thought. Returning his focus to his predicament with Naruto, all that's left of that family now is that bitch of a mother and her little pampered brat. I detest the idea of ever having to deal with every other Haruno in that family. Dealing with just one is enough. Yes, I can't help but be thankful to the Kyuubi for saving me a lot of headaches and mental disorders from having to deal with more than one Haruno in my class, Iruka said, shivering at such a horrible thought. I genuinely don't think I could handle it. I know that my parents were killed by the demon, and I know they would be upset with me for detesting anyone more than that demon brat, but when it comes to Sakura, I just can't help myself. The Kyuubi boy is much quieter. At least it's likely that most people can tolerate him as long as that boy stays silent and listens, as he seems to do. It won't be difficult to accomplish. Iruka narrowed her eyes thoughtfully. The Kyuubi child was like that, according to the Hokage. However, since practically everyone is aware of what a demon he really is, he probably can't be someone that most people can tolerate being around here. Yes, at first, I find it difficult to even be around that child because he is the Kyuubi who killed my parents. However, he is so silent that I eventually forget he is there, but that pink-haired bimbo is always in your face because of her obnoxious personality and talking back attitude. In addition, she is spoiled and constantly views practically everyone as inferior to her. Iruka appeared to be Sasuke, and let's not even talk about how fangirl she is about the Uchiha. Indeed, I would much rather spend a full day with Naruto than the same amount of time with that shrieking monster. Iruka let out a sigh of acceptance and carried on with his thoughts. I can't help but want to express my gratitude to that dirty demon for eliminating the majority of the Haruno family. To do that, I'll simply be kind to him and let that demon keep his sword for today. Hehe. The Hokage's orders would still require me to be kind to that demon, but I'm more inclined to comply now. Naruto, since this will be the last day for our class as being students, you can carry that sword with you around the academy for today, Iruka replied. Once you become a leaf ninja, you won't have to worry about that kind of problem anymore whenever you need to step into the academy, okay? The young samurai gave a shrug. Now, Naruto, why don't you go choose a seat to sit in so I can continue where I left off before you and Hokage-sama came in here? Iruka responded. The blonde gave a nod of approval and moved to the back of the room, where he found a seat near the windows. Iruka returned his focus to the class after Naruto took a seat. Now that all is said and done, I'll start assigning you all to genin teams along with your specified Junin instructors. The speech I was giving before Naruto and Hokage-sama arrived will have to be cut short because of our discussion on these recent developments with our new student here, he stated. I hope you all can forgive me for moving on so quickly. Relieved to move past Iruka's dull farewell speech and onto more pressing matters, the class erupted in cheers since they saw Naruto as their salvation from Iruka's evil boring speeches. Many of the recently converted Naruto fangirls were supporting him. Regarding Naruto, he was merely taken aback by how much louder ninja were than samurai in his native country. Really, it was ironic. Samurai were supposed to do all the screaming and shouting, while ninja were supposed to be the quiet ones. All of that, though, was initially a misconception. Ninja's initial perception of samurai was only influenced by their familiarity with them in the elemental countries. Indeed, misconceptions plus flashback. Naruto's dream comes to an end.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.